Okay, it's 9 o'clock, so I guess we'll get started. Um, we'll just go through the schedule just for today. We have this Guinness now, and then at 1 o'clock we're going to be showing at the shul. That's in person, the Gush Etzion movie. Mincha will be about 2:10. The movie's about an hour. Tehillim it's an hour. Tehillim is 2:40. Then the Chafetz Chaim videos. I had on all over the shul about the Chafetz Chaim. You have a lot of big name rabbis speaking. Rabbi Fran, Rabbi Krohn, Charlie Harari. There's a whole bunch of people speaking at that. And then we're going to have the interview with Dr. K at the Dr. K. That's from the Shoah Foundation, the Spielberg, at 6 o'clock. Mincha is going to be 7:20. That's the second Mincha. Ma'ariv at 8:15, and the fast ends at 8:29. We'll have also a video between Mincha and Ma'ariv. Okay. This that you're watching was a project that's done in many camps, where they have the kids actually build the Beis Hamikdash, and then they burn it, and they see their work burn, and it's powerful. You know, they spend all day working on something, and then but it kind of tries to bring home somewhat a little bit to kids what it means to loss, and that's a lot what we're going to be talking about. Not only the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, which we will talk about, but all the losses that we have in Klal Yisrael. So if you haven't been on this type of forum of my this keynotes, it's a little bit different than other keynotes that you'll hear. What I try to do is I try to take the keynotes. I think everybody tries to do this: take the keynotes and make it meaningful to today's generation, to explain the keynotes. I try to do that though with different videos or stories, songs, different things I found throughout the whole year on the internet, and I try to cut them down, so you won't see the whole video. Sometimes you will, but many times I'll take a large video and I'll cut it down and just make the short point that I think kind of relates to this particular kinna, to drive home the point of the kinna, or to really drive home the point that I think the kinna is trying to address. We'll see all different people, from Benny Netanyahu when he was 28 years old, speaking at college in a debate. We're going to have Arnold Schwarzenegger, a bunch of, a whole few rabbis who are going to speak and try to bring different points light. And the theme, of course, is going to be very Israel focused this year, as everybody's is. What's going on today, and October 7th. And so you'll see a whole lot of that, as well as at the end, we'll have a lot of inspiration. Where do we go from here? How do we start? How do we rebuild? And what hope do we have? We'll have Naftali Bennett gave an amazing speech about that as well. So, and then there'll be small inspirational videos to end off. So we're gonna, before we start about actually doing the keynotes, I wanted to play this clip from Rav J.J. Schachter. So Rav J.J. Schachter spends all day going through keynotes. He's been doing it for many, many years. He has said a lot on keynotes. And so I took one little portion that I found really important on explaining the history and understanding keynotes in general. So this is Rav J.J. Schachter, and he spoke on the Tikva podcast. You could hear the whole, if you go to the Tikva podcast, you could hear his whole speech on it, as well as he also spoke from Mizrahi and many other institutions. Rav J.J. Schachter has been really putting himself out for Tisha Bav for many, many years. He even wrote a book on it.
Because the 9th of Av is a day set aside to commemorate all Jewish tragedy. In a sense, the price we pay, and I'll explain in a moment why we're prepared to pay that price, is a flattening of the historicity of each of these events. What we lose is, well, I mean, what happened in the Crusades is a whole different story than what happened in 1242 in Paris, is a whole different story than what happened during the Hadrianic persecutions. The entire context, the world, the events, the context is radically different. And all of that gets effaced when we bunch them all together under this day. And that's exactly, I think, the point that we're trying to make. My lay teacher, Professor Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi, published a lot, but his probably most celebrated book is Zachor, subtitled Jewish History and Jewish Memory. And he points out that Jews are really not historians, but Jews had great memories. And this is a good example of that I'm not interested on the 9th of Av in the history, in the specificity of the story and the events of each one of these tragedies. I'm interested in one thing. I'm interested in my relationship to God. I'm interested in how can I frame my ongoing relationship to God when I am faced with what on the face of it seems to be God turning his face away from me, that God is rejecting me, that God is punishing me, that God is destroying me, that God destroyed his temple. The temple was the central focal point of my relationship to God, and God now turned away. Does that mean that God now has abandoned me? Does that mean that I abandoned God? What does that have to do with my relationship to God? How do I continue to maintain a faith in God? And that is the focal point in all of these tragedies. I'm not interested in what was the cause of the Khmelnytsky massacres in 1648, or why were Jews massacred in Blois in France in 1171. I'm interested in what does that have to do with me and God now? Or what does that have to do with God and me now? And I would invite your audience to consider that when one reads the elegies, the keynote, one finds something what I think is really fascinating. And that is, there is not even a focus on the historical events surrounding the destruction of the temples. You would think that these are the two major events that happened on that day. The Mishnah tells us both temples were destroyed on that day. Tell me the story, tell me the background, tell me the Babylonians, tell me the Romans, zero. That even the story of the destruction of the temple is not told historically. The basic and fundamental theme of the keynote is, I am struggling to maintain, to retain, to strengthen my relationship to God in the face of what appears to be God's turning away from me. That's the core issue, even in the context of the destructions of both temples. And so that carries all the way across. That carries across all the centuries. That carries across right now. I am overwhelmed by this question right now. I try to daven, I try to pray, and I'm struggling. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss. Young men, fathers, sons, husbands, killed. We hear about those who were killed. I'm now in Jerusalem, and we go visit wounded in the hospital, and it's unbelievable. Families are shattered forever, and I don't understand it, and I struggle with it. And that's all part of the Tisha B'Av experience, to try to grapple with what appears to be a distancing. But yet I believe in God. I believe that I'm only a puny human being. Why should I understand the way God runs the world? And I read the keynote that were written in the wake of the destruction of the temple, struggling to retain a connection to God. And I read them now and I find them meaningful. And that's the context in which I'm going to be reading the keynote this year, to try to wrest from them, W-R-E-S-T, a sense of connection. And I'm also going to be looking for hope. You know, it's so interesting that even on the 9th of Av, a day that's set aside to commemorate tragedy, Rabbi Soloveitchik pointed out often that it's also a day of nechama, it's a day of comfort. As the day goes on, things get easier. You know,
So that's what we're going to try to do. Try to find meaning, try to find how we could connect to God during these really tragic times. And mostly it's about us as a nation. But this has also become a time to deal with all types of tragedies, personal tragedies, and how do we deal? How do we go on? How do we think about these tragedies? And the keynotes work on this issue. Um, I saw this, I heard this in the Sfarim podcast. So I bought this book called Voices of Consolation. And what it is it's letters that rabbis wrote to other people for consolation. The author, Rabbi Hexter, lost a child, and so that he found Nechama is trying by looking at all the different rabbis' letters, and he translates them, and he tries to show how the different rabbis spoke to others and tried to give them Nechama. One of the letters, which is so powerful, is the first letter that he has in the book. We'll do two of the letters here, one later on. This is a letter that the Rambam wrote in 1185 to Rabbeinu Yefes of Eretz Yisrael. And it says here, the Rambam expresses in his letters his deep grief almost 8 years after the tragic loss of his brother, Rav David, on the Indian Ocean. Rav David was a gem trader who supported his brother, enabling him to devote himself to Torah. He supported the Rambam. And tragically, his ship sank, taking his life as well as his fortune. Listen to the words of the Rambam. This is 8 years after the tragedy. To the most honorable master Yefes, the Chacham, the expert, and the wise Dayan, son of the most honorable master Eliyahu, the Dayan, the Chassid Zal, from he who loves him and who prays for his increased honor, Moshe, the son of Rav Maimon Zal. Your dear letter reached me, but I am surprised by its content. In it, you complain that I have not written to you to inquire as to your well-being since the time that I left Eretz Yisrael. In fact, concerning this very matter that you brought up to admonish me, it's you who deserves to be admonished, not I. You were wrong, not wronged. After we parted ways, my father and teacher, Sal, died. His letters of consolation I experienced many grave misfortunes in the lands of Egypt, such as illness and financial loss. Also, informers plotted to kill me. The worst and latest calamity that befell me, worse than any other tragedy that I experienced from the day I was born until the present day, while I was passing of the Tzaddik Zal, who drowned while traveling in the Indian Ocean. Lost along with him was a fortune belonging to me, to him, as well as to others. He left in my care his young daughter and widow. For close to a year since this devastating news reached me, I laid sick on my bed with severe inflammation, high fever, and depression on the brink of death. Almost 8 years almost 8 years have since passed, and I'm still mourning, and I have not found consolation. What can console me? He grew up on my knees. He was my brother, my student. He also engaged in business in the marketplace, earned money, and supported me comfortably, allowing me to gain expertise in the Torah as well as in grammar. I have no joy other than seeing him. I am bereft of happiness. He has gone to the eternal world and left me anxious in a foreign land. Whenever I see his handwriting or one of his books, my heart turns over and my grief awakens. Had it not been for the Torah, which is my delight, along with the words of wisdom that allow me to forget my anguish, I would have perished in my affliction. Such a powerful words by the Rambam. You see, the Rambam could never really get over, and people can, very hard to get over any type of loss. And you see, even such a great person as the Rambam has struggled with these loss. And that's what we struggle with throughout Tisha Bav, throughout these keynotes. We try to struggle with the loss of not only the base of English, but all the losses that we face, and the fear and the anti-Semitism. And so this is what we're struggling with right now. We'll start with the first kina, and the first kina is number 6. We did the first 5 last night. And the kina is really just a shock that when we come to something happens, when we hear about October 7th, we really don't even know how to react. We all quickly run to say Tehillim, but we don't really know how to process such a loss. And that's what happened. The world stood still, and that's what it says, Shavas. And so the whole world stood still, and we didn't know what to do. How do we process such a loss? If we look in one of the part of the kina, it says Tavol Tzar Asher Kila. So we pay almost for almost annihilating us, who has led us away from the burning walls to be found in Halach and Hebron, the old and the young men and women dragged away in chains. Please look on from the high at your cherished people. Remember the Lord, what has happened to us. That's a theme that you constantly come back to. So the first kin, I always like to focus on, of all the tragedies that we have, this all begins with the Beis Hamikdash. Really, I mean, it starts. You could go back to the spies and other places, but the Beis Hamikdash is the first massive tragedy that we have Tisha Bav for. And so for every year, I try to find a different video that tries to bring that to light, the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, what happened, what's trying to put yourself in that situation of the Beis Hamikdash. So here's a reenactment of that.
Titus, the Roman Emperor Vespasian, who was in command of the 4-month siege of Jerusalem, ordered his entire army to prepare to storm the temple at dawn. A total of 60,000 Roman legionaries and local auxiliaries were eager to deliver the final blow to the defiant but broken city. Within the walls, 500,000 starving Jews survived in diabolical conditions. Some were fanatical religious zealots, some were freebooting bandits, but most were innocent families with no escape from this magnificent death trap. Titus set about reducing Jerusalem with systematic efficiency and overwhelming force. The Jews fought for every inch with almost suicidal abandon. As the blistered and jagged hills sprouted forests of fly-blown crucified cadavers, the city within was tormented by a sense of impending doom, intransigent fanaticism, whimsical sadism, and searing hunger. Yet the rebels were still fighting. Although Titus was proving to be a gifted commander and a popular son of the new emperor, Vespasian's unproven dynasty depended on victory over the Jewish rebels. Jerusalem was, Josephus observed, like a wild beast gone mad, which, for want of food, fell now upon eating its own flesh. The Romans fought back and pushed the Jews into the temple itself. One legionary, seized with a divine fury, grabbed some burning materials and lit the curtains and frame of a golden window linked to the rooms around the actual temple. By morning, the fire had spread to the very heart of holiness. The Jews, seeing the flames licking the Holy of Holies and threatening to destroy it, made a great clamor and ran to prevent it. But it was too late. They barricaded themselves in the inner court, then watched in aghast silence. Thousands of civilians and rebels mustered on the steps of the altar, waiting to fight to the last, or just die hopelessly. All had their throats cut by the exhilarated Romans, until around the altar lay dead bodies heaped one upon another, with the blood running down the steps. 10,000 Jews died in the burning temple. The cracking of vast stones and wooden beams made a sound like thunder. Josephus watched the death of the temple. The roar of the flames streaming far and wide mingled with the groans of the falling victims, and owing to the height of the hill and the mass of the burning pile, one would have thought the whole city was ablaze. And then the din, nothing more deafening or appalling could be conceived than that. There were the war cries of the Roman legions sweeping onward, the howls of the rebels encircled by fire and swords, the rush of the people who, cut off above, fled panic-stricken only to fall into the arms of the foe, and their shrieks as they met their fate. You would have thought the Temple Hill was boiling over from its base, being everywhere one mass of flame. Mount Moriah, where King David had placed the Ark of the Covenant, and where his son Solomon had built the first temple, was seething hot, full of fire on every part of it, while inside, dead bodies covered the floors. Now the rampaging Romans, seeing that the inner temple was destroyed, grabbed the gold and furniture, carrying out their swag before they set fire to the rest of the complex. Titus decided to eradicate Jerusalem, a decision which Josephus blamed on the rebels. The rebellion destroyed the city and the Romans destroyed the rebellion. Titus.
All right, well, now I'm going to say the kina. So before I said the kina, so just the rule for the kina, so we're going to just do every kina that we say, we're just going to spend no more than 2 minutes on. And then you could spend the rest of the day on it if you want. But here we're only going to spend 2 minutes reciting the kina. Before we do that, for this year, for every kina, I want to remember somebody who was murdered, or in one of the case, we'll do some of the hostages. But I want to remember people who are affected by what's happening now. And so we're going to read a little biography, a little bit about some of the people who were lost that maybe we never heard of during October 7th. Shlomi and Shahar Matis, residents of Kibbutz Holit, tragically lost their lives when Hamas terrorists infiltrated the Gaza Strip and attacked their home. During the attack, the couple courageously shielded their son Rotam with their bodies, ultimately saving his life. In a heartfelt eulogy, Rotam honored his parents, describing them as incredible individuals who consistently spread goodness. He emphasized that even in their final moments, they prioritized to safety and demonstrated their unwavering commitment to helping others. Mom, it's been a while since I last confided in you. For 9 days, you haven't called and asked about me. And suddenly, I feel the absence. I realize that I did not express my love to you enough, and now you have been taken from us in the most terrific way. It feels like a never-ending nightmare, expressed Shakir, the daughter, as she prayed tribute. I love you deeply, and a part of me still struggles to accept the reality. I hope that you won't cease to exist, but rather find peace in a better place. I want to believe that you will continue to live somewhere. We'll now read Kina number 6, and then for 2 minutes, and then we'll go on to the next Kina. So it starts off with Shabbat. Okay, we'll do the next kina. Kina number 7. Kina number 7 is really broken up into two parts. The first part is the asks, how could God allow such a destruction? And then the second part, deals with that how could God have forgotten our relationship? How could we forget our relationship with God? And so, once you take away all the relationship that we have, the marriage with Hashem, and our marriage, the Torah, all the promises that we have, all of that, then we don't have anything. We're no different than anybody else. And so, this kind of really deals with that question of how could God forget our relationship with Him? As Jews, one of the issues that we have here, and I think this is why the Washington was so important, is that we felt forgotten. We felt like the whole world was against us, and that we were just forgotten by God. And then when we had the Washington rally, it kind of brought us back to that we do have a mission within this world. So if you look at this part of the kino, I don't have the kinos. I'm sorry, I didn't put the kinos. Maybe for the future, I will do that. And somebody asked me if I should have the kinos to show as we read it. I don't have those slides, so I apologize for that. The question is, so he says, how could you condemn us in your fury, imprisoning your faith witnesses in the hands of fiends, and not remember the glorious crowns with which you bedecked your servants? And so we answer, remember, Hashem, what happened to us. The whole idea of memory, of remembering the relationship that we have, who we are as Jews. So that's really what this kina will focus on. So this is a great story. It says, after 5 years in the labor camp, I found myself going to synagogue once again. I walked into the synagogue in Budapest on Shabbos afternoon. It was astonishing to see a whole crowd of Jews living as a community. It was so strange for me. I kept asking myself, is this real or only a dream? A boy turned to me and remarked that it was not permitted to carry things in the street because there was no Erev in the city. He asked me, don't you know it's Shabbos today? This struck me so deeply that I started crying. I thought, what happened to me? And that others must have to remind me that it's Shabbos and that carrying isn't permitted. I explained to the boy that I had just arrived in the city on the trains after years of suffering and terrible illness during the whole length of the war. A while later, I realized what I had done had happened simply because of my exhaustion and confused fate. Certainly, I hadn't desecrated the day deliberately. Even on the train, I had remembered to say the Shabbos prayers. The synagogue was packed when the Rav arose to deliver a shir on Pirkei Avos. I stood in wonder at the sight, the thought, after all those years, that I'd forgotten there was such a thing as chairs and benches to sit on. I sat down on the floor and listened to the Rav. Some people pointed out to me that there was a bench nearby, and I was obliged to explain to them that after so long in the camps, it hadn't occurred to me that one could sit anywhere other than the floor. For this kina, I wanted to turn to those who are kidnapped, and say that we don't forget them, that we'll keep davening and we'll keep praying for them until they all come home. So we'll talk about four who are kidnapped. We have the picture of them that they sent of them still alive on their sleeping mat. So Agam Berger, who served in the IDF as a reconnaissance soldier, was abducted from her base in Nachal Oz A month ago, the video of her abduction was published by Hamas, showing the terrorists shouting at her and her friends. Agam is seen in the video with a bleeding face. On her 19th birthday, which came just before October 7th, Agam wrote a blessing to herself in her diary. In the last 10 minutes of my birthday, I wish for myself and my loved ones happiness and good health until 120. May I continue on my path, succeed in everything I do, and be truly happy. Surely in God's care, He will accompany me in every step. Thank you for my family. Liri Albag, Mr. Eli Albag says, Liri is his youngest daughter, the happiest, who liked music, who liked to dance, and who had friends all over the world. He, in his self-confessed tough guy, he's unable to sleep and often unable to talk because of what he thinks could be happening to her. All the family's broken. She has 2 sisters and a young brother. And from October 7th, we're not living. He said, I wake up in the morning alive and go to sleep dead. Every day. That is what happened to us. No day and no night. Karina Ariev. Karina is a 19-year-old corporal in the Israeli Defense Force, was sanctioned at Nahal Oz base at the border of Gaza on Shabbos, and she was finishing her shift at the base. Her sister was abducted by Hamas. She was unharmed, in pajamas, in the bomb shelter with other soldiers, said Ariev. She called me at 6:30 a.m. to tell me that the terrorists were there and she could hear them outside of the bomb shelter, she recalled. We later found a video on Telegram in which we were able to identify my sister and 2 other girls in the truck with Hamas terrorists. You could tell she was wounded. And Gabriela Gilboa, 19, an observation soldier in the Border Defense Corps 414th Combat Intelligence Collection Unit, Nahal Oz base. Gilboa was in touch with her family in the morning of the attack, texting that they were in the attack and to pray for them. So we will not forget all our hostages. We're going to read, in the next 2 minutes, we're going to read Kina number 7. And again, I apologize for not having the Kinas. Actually, I have a PDF of it somewhere. Oh, here it is. So if you look at the chat, Irv was kind enough to post it. Thank you, Irv. So Eicha Atztasa Ba'Kacha, Kina number 7. And the next Kina is, if I could fly up to Hashem and face and speak to Hashem, well, I'd speak to you, say, why did this happen? I would ask, what happened here? And the truth is that we do have this ability to do that every day when we daven. We could confront Hashem and speak to Hashem. We spend so many times just reading text in the siddur, but we should really have heartfelt conversations with Hashem. So here he says, Ede od chog hashamayim, ede od chog hashamayim. So he says, what, that I could soar to the spheres of the heaven. I would make the heaven lament with me. I would curse the day on which I was twice destroyed. I would lament, would that my head were water. Rabbi Foreman told this story. He said, years ago, I went to see an exhibition of photographs that had won a Pulitzer Prize for the best news reporting. I was struck by how, one after another, the photos were all suffused with the same themes: visceral loss and suffering. A particular photo caught my eye. It was a Cambodian refugee, a woman clutching a child, forging her way through a rushing river. She was surrounded by a torrent of water that was nearly neck high. What seemed like every ounce of strength, she struggled with one arm to keep her daughter's head above the murderous wave. Her arms were wrapped around the child and the limb of a tree hanging over the river from the embankment. With the other arm, she reached out desperately in the direction of the camera. I stood there in the museum, and here was a woman gazing at me through the lens of this camera across the stretch of time. When you look at this photo, it almost felt as you could reach out with your own hand and grab her arm and pull her child to safety. I stood there looking at the desperate mother and child. A sudden sense of shock and outrage shook me out of my reverie. I suddenly occurred to me, what was this photographer doing, taking this picture? Why didn't he throw his camera aside and instead reach out to pull this woman to the shore? Reporters are there as third-party narrators of the news, but they also are human beings. So the choice to be a third-party observer is, on some level, an arbitrary one. When you are witnessing great suffering, history may laud you for reporting the suffering. But as a human being, what integrity do you really have left if you choose to stand apart from it? The third party person offers the benefit of dispassionate reporting, but sometimes you can't afford to be the third person. Sometimes you are part of the story, whether you like it or not. Major Ado Yoshua is somebody who is part of the story. He did not allow the story to just be a story for him. He realized that he had to be a part of the story. A 27-year-old from Yavne held the position of commander in the training battalion at the School of Special Air Forces. In response to the sudden Hamas attack, Major Yoshua bravely joined the initial forces of the Shagdag unit, leaping into action to secure the Re'im base in the Gaza Strip. His mission was to eliminate the terrorists and safeguard the lives of the remaining soldiers. Tragically, he lost his life during one of the encounters with the terrorists at the base. Reflecting on Major Yoshua's childhood, his cousin Almag Yoshua shared that he was mischievous, always fond of making pranks and causing a bit of chaos. However, alongside his playful nature, he possessed an extraordinary heart. Wherever he went, he radiated immense light and warmth. He fought relentlessly to reach the position he held, and in the end, he made the ultimate sacrifice while defending his beloved homeland that he cherished with all his soul. Almog expressed, his departure has left us all with shattered hearts, and the magnitude of this reality is beyond comprehension. So this kina, when we read this kina, you have to think, what are we doing? We're a part of this story. We're all a part of this story now. And so we have to say, even if we have to go and daven, arrange davening sessions, arrange tehillim, say tehillim ourselves, we're all a part of the story. And we have to say, what is our obligation within this? What is our powers? What can we do? And what should we be doing? For the next 2 minutes, we're going to read keynote number 8, A'adei ad chub shamayim. And the next kina, we're going to skip number 9. We'll go to number 10. It's here. So this kina is the Kohanim. It's the loss of their leadership, the Kohanim, and the last fighters we had before our destruction. They were the ones. They were the last defense. After all the fighters were, they had the Kohanim, and they fought bravely till the end. So the one I always try to take some issue. I understand what J.J. Schefter said. We're not so interested in all the history, except on how does it relate to us for today. Like, well, how is that going to relate to our relationship with Hashem? I did want to understand the question of Bar Kokhba rebellion. The Romans were pretty strong. So why did the Jews go all out to rebel? What was it? Why didn't they just, give in to the Romans? What was it about the Bar Kokhba rebellion that spurred Bar Kokhba and all the Jews to be willing to really risk their lives when the odds were so strong against them? So here's a paper. Peter, I found this whole paper on it, the Bar Kokhba revolt and circumcision. He brings 3 different answers to this question: that the Roman government retracted from their previous permission to rebuild the temple, construction of the Roman city was built over the ruins of Jerusalem, as well as the temple to Jupiter on the Temple Mount, and finally, Hadrian prohibited Jewish circumcision. To just bring us this to light a little bit, I want to show this video of where is it and what just a slice of the history behind it, and then we'll try to see how it could relate to us today.
After 3 hours of climbing Mount Struya, we reached the top of the mountain on our way to the Cave of Letters, a distance of about 3-4 kilometers to the southwest. The discoveries from this cave added much knowledge about the Bar Kokhba revolt that took place during the years 132 and 136. This was the last significant revolt of the Jews in Israel against the Roman rule. The leader of the revolt was Shimon Bar Kokhba, then known as Shimon ben Kuzba or Bar Kuzba. It's interesting that the name Bar Kokhba, which means son of star, was first mentioned by Eusebius, the famous Archbishop of Caesarea, 200 years after the revolt. In documents found in the cave, he is named Shimon Bar Kuzba, President of Israel. Very little is known about him. According to the existing findings, he lacks the suitable pedigree or assets, and despite this, he reached the highest possible status, sometimes attributed to King David dynasty. Perhaps this is the reason for the absolute support he receives from Rabbi Akiva, who even declared him as the Messiah. The letters of Bar Kokhba, some in Hebrew and some in Aramaic, reflect a firm leader and a talented administrator, According to the letter found, Bar Kokhba leadership was undisputed, and such leadership was difficult to achieve at the time without broad support from all layers of the population. Still, it is important to note that not everyone took part in the revolt. For example, the people of Galilee and the people of Tekoa did not participate. It is difficult to talk about the Cave of Letters findings without an overview of the revolt. Apparently, a number of actions contributed to its initiation. If due to the decree forbidding Jewish laws, the desire to free oneself from economic bondage to the Romans, the expectation for the Messiah and redemption, and perhaps the decision of the Roman Emperor Hadrian to establish the pagan city of Aelia Capitolina in place of Jerusalem. It is important to note that the revolt was carried out after years of detailed planning and preparation, which included, among other things, stockpiling weapons manufactured for the Roman army with defects on purpose that disqualified for use, so Bar Kokhba people could adopt them. This, by the way, shows that the Roman had sufficient trust in the locals to let them build weapons for the Romans. The preparation also included the fortification of strategic sites and the excavation of hundreds of underground hiding systems in Judea and Galilee. 3 locations were selected as key bases. The city of Beitar, which was close to Jerusalem in a suitable strategic location, served as the military and political center of the revolt. Herodion, which was built by Herod the Great as his burial place, was the administrative center, and Ein Gedi on the shores of the Dead Sea, 4 kilometers from here, was selected to serve as a logistic
Mark, I can't hear it anymore.
You can't hear it?
Much more Hebrew instead of Aramaic.
Now I hear it again.
Roman rule failed to suppress the revolt in the early years, which began to affect the empire, including the concern from uprising in other territories.
Could you hear it?
So Emperor Hadrian took a significant step.
Yes,
and
now I
sent
can.
Judea at the end of 133, the
Severus, who served until then as the Roman commissioner in Britain, along with forces of a magnitude that were not seen here before. Roman forces at that time may have reached up to a third of the total military power of the Roman Empire, 28 legions, while they required 4 legions to suppress the Great Revolt during the years 66 until 70 CE. This indicates the strength of Bar Kokhba warriors and their fighting abilities. The Romans led a cautious and destructive war campaign against the rebels. In the fall of 135, Beitar, one of the last strongholds, fell, and Bar Kokhba was killed. After the fall of Beitar, Jewish refugees, mainly army commanders, officials, and their families, fled to refuge caves. The suppression of the revolt was apparently completed in the first month of 136. The destruction caused in the country was immense. The result of the uprising the cessation of Jewish governmental independence for nearly 2,000 years until the establishment of the State of Israel. According to the testimony of the Roman historian Dio Cassius, and I quote, 985 of their most important villages were destroyed. 580,000 people were killed in the battles, while the death toll from famine and plagues, they do not have a number. And the continuation of the quote, Jewish prisoners were sold for the price of one serving of horse. The slave market was simply flooded, more than 100,000 people. And another significant step, the name Judea district was deleted and replaced with Syria, Palestine, adopting the Philistines name from the Bible in an attempt to disconnect between the people of Israel and the land of Israel. The pagan city of Ilia Capitolina was built on the ruins of Jerusalem, thus fulfilling the plan that contributed to the revolt in the first place.
The video does go on, but you see here at the end is he talks about how it itself brought the idea of this Palestine, the name of Palestine, as well. But you see how the Jews were willing to, fight, and the leadership, people who like Bar Kokhba, who you never thought would be a leader, was willing to come up to the floor and take a leadership role, trying to fight for what? For Judaism, for our way of life. It's people could assimilate and have a better chance of living, and yet they were willing to fight for what they believe in and who they are, and not willing to give up. Sergeant First Class Dor Mandeji, a 24-year-old from Rosh Hashanah, served in the Golani Brigade and later joined the police force. When the war broke out, he was deployed to the southern region. They arrived in Sderot and were then taken to Be'eri. They encountered a group of terrorists and successfully neutralized them. They continued their mission to various locations where terrorists were present. Unfortunately, during the encounter with another group of terrorists who fired an RPG at the vehicle, contact with Dor was lost. His brother Nir recounted. For 10 agonizing days, Dor was officially declared missing until the devastating news reached the family. He was a beloved member of our family. He had a partner, and they had plans to move in together and build a future, including marriage. He had even started to planning their wedding, his brother added. He was a cherished son and the center of his mother's world. We have no choice but to stay strong and support each other. Dor leaves behind grieving parents, 5 siblings, and a partner whom we're planning a wedding. The kina number 10 is a long kina. We're not going to be able to do it in a few minutes, so we'll just do 2 minutes of it, and then at 9:55, we'll just do 2 minutes of it, and then we'll move on to the next kina. Eicha yeshva chavatzeles hasharon. So each one represents what's highlighted here in this kina is the different mishmeros. They had these 24 mishmeros, the 24 watches that they had in the basement. So it's to remember all those watches. All right, we'll now move on to the next kina. The next kina is the oldest kina. Vayikonen Yirmiyahu al Yeshayahu. And this is the historical one where Yoshiyahu, we had all our, it was he did this whole movement to bring everybody back to Judaism, and then it was snatched away from us. This whole movement, we thought that everything was going great. We'll rebuild. He fixed up the Beit HaMikdash. Everything seemed to be going great, and then he was killed. And so this is the oldest kina that we have. Yirmiyahu saying the hesped, saying a eulogy for this great king whose potential was lost, way too young. So here I wanted to turn again to this book, Voices of Consolation, and my question is how do we eulogize those whose lives were torn away from us? This is one of two keynotes that we're going to deal with this question, this and number 17. And so here, if you look at this, it's, oh wait, sorry, didn't do the slideshow. There it is, sorry. So this is going to Pinchas Menachem Alter, Pnei Menachem of Ger. It's a letter to parents on the passing of a second child. The Pnei Menachem experienced the loss of two of his children, as he writes in this letter. So it says, it was so difficult to comfort you. The Gemara in Brachos and Baba Basra teach that when Rav Yochanan would comfort those whose children had died in his lifetime, he would bring a bone with him and say, this is the bone of my 10th child whom I lost. That 10th child, the Gemara tells us, died a gruesome death. Rav Nissen Yigon explains that he fell into a boiling pot of water. How are we to understand Rav Yochanan? Why would somebody derive comfort from the fact that Rav Yochanan suffered the most unspeakable suffering? Does knowing that someone else suffering even more make it easier for the person who had just suffered a loss? All it does is show more suffering. The answer is that Rav Yochanan didn't want that person to feel guilty that the Midas Adin, Hashem's attribute of strict justice, was pursuing him because of some perceived deficiency in his service of Hashem. Rav Yochanan was pure, complete tzaddik, and still he suffered the loss of 10 children. From here we see that we don't understand Hashem's calculations when he visits this type of tragedy upon us. We know only one thing, that whatever he does is righteous, and in the depths of din, there is mercy. I do not in any way compare myself to Rav Yochanan. However, if you find comfort in this, you should know that I too lost 2 children who died with tremendous suffering. I want to show this video, and then he goes on. This is really, really powerful. Gabriel Sasson, he lost all his children. He lost his family in a fire, and the question is how do you deal with that? How do you even start to be able to comprehend that? And that's a big part of Tisha Bav, that we all sit here and we mourn together. But we look at mourning and try to support each other through the mourning process, and try to understand how can we go on? How do we go on with life? Again, I'm going to deal with this question a little bit more in number 17, but let's listen to him.
When I was a teenager, my mother died, and our family just didn't. When I was a teenager, my mother died, and our family just didn't feel like a family anymore. So all I wanted my whole life was to have a big family with lots of love and warmth. So I got married to a beautiful woman and gave my all to raise my family. I had the family of my dreams. 8 beautiful children that were so pure and full of life, with lots of joy and love. I was the happiest person in the world. I would always make sure to spend the Sabbath, the Jewish day of rest, with them. My wife would light candles every Friday evening to usher in the holy day, and I would go to the synagogue with my older children. When I returned, I would be joyfully greeted by my family, all freshly bathed and dressed up for the Sabbath. I would make a blessing over the wine and bless each member of my family and give them a warm hug and a kiss. And then we would partake in the festive meal, with each child having his or her turn to speak, sharing what they had learned that week. We would sing songs together and just enjoy each other's company while being embraced by the love and warmth that I had always been looking for. Then, for some reason, one day, I made an exception and agreed to leave my family for the Sabbath. That Friday night, when everyone was sound asleep, after having a beautiful evening, a fire broke out in the house. The fire spread throughout the house in minutes. Being a day of rest, my phone was turned off. The police were looking for me all night and found me in the morning. They told me that there was a fire in my house. My wife and daughter are in the hospital. They took me to the police station. My sister's husband showed up with a rabbi and a medic. My brother-in-law told me that the other 7 children all perished. I couldn't even cry. I just fell on the floor and just started to scream my head off. I lost track of time, just screaming because the pain was so intense. It wasn't just the fact that I had lost everything that I cared about and strived for my whole life. It was that these children were just so precious. In the middle of all that screaming, I heard the rabbi tell me to stop and get up. So I did. Then the medic approached. He wanted to inject me with a calming agent. I told him to go away. I don't want it. I wasn't about to go numb and hide from the challenge. My dear kids gave me their final gift with their passing. It was the greatest gift that they could have given me, an opportunity to grow. I had to overcome in order not to waste their lives. Life is full of challenges, and they're all opportunities to grow. When faced with a challenge, we have a choice. Either we embrace the challenge and grow, or we resist and we suffer. The more we resist, the more we suffer. If you insist that life must be your way, and you fight reality because you want to stay in your comfort zone, and you don't want to take responsibility for your life, then you'll end up suffering. You may become angry or depressed, or you may just go numb and apathetic. You can give up, or you can blame others, or even the world. The choice is clear. So how did I cope? How did I manage? How was I able to get up when the rabbi told me to do so? The answer is when I said by the eulogy for my children, surrender. I surrender myself to God. I surrender myself to His will. I let go of everything that was dear to me. Otherwise, I would have broken. When one nullifies his ego, then you have access to the divine. You become unlimited. Your consciousness expands as the filter called me is removed. And you can see solutions to situations that you didn't see before. When you surrender, by definition, there is no resistance, and therefore there is no more suffering. A miracle occurs. Surrendering is not a one-time thing. The negative emotions and the despair keeps coming back. And I have to constantly surrender by feeling the emotions and letting them pass through me. God tailor-makes our unique challenges for each one of us, and He's also there to help us through it. But it has to be our choice. Otherwise, there's no reason for us to be in this world. God gives us challenges so that we could grow and reveal His greatness. He wants us to become great as well. He wants to take us to a greater place than we ever thought possible, to a life that is much greater than we wanted for ourselves. For me, it's clear. The only way is to trust in God. Then you connect to the infinite and everything becomes possible.
Before we read the Kina, so this is Orit. She also had this. This is a short, small video. She also lost family members. But what he's saying is so powerful. The fact is that we don't have control. We think we have control of this world, but so much is out of our control. You know, we could daven for Eretz Yisrael, we could raise money, we could do, and we have our obligation. We talked about it, But in the end of the day, we have to say that there's a plan in place and that we don't understand it. The world is much longer than we've been here. We're just kind of visiting. We live a very short life. We can make an impact in the life that we have, but there's a lot that we're not going to be able to understand within this world. And we have to be able to accept that, be able to move on from all these types of tragedies and be able to handle our mission within this world. So instead of having a paragraph, I'll show this video that we'll read.
In a nation marked by resilience and faith, Orit Mark Ettinger stands as a beacon of hope amidst profound tragedy. Orit lost each of her 4 family members to terrorism, their lives cut short by those who sought to extinguish the light of hope. Her father, Rabbi Michael Mark, murdered near Hebron in 2016. Her brother Shlomi, killed in a traffic accident while in service in an elite force for his nation. Her cousin Elahan Kalmanson fell in battle, and her brother Pedaya Menachem Mark died fighting Hamas terrorists in the battlefields of Gaza just a few weeks ago on October 31st. But even in the darkest of times, we must cling to our faith and resilience. We cannot let darkness consume us. Orit's husband serves in a commando unit, facing danger in Gaza as a reservist. Yet she remains steadfast in her belief that the light will always triumph over darkness. Orit's message resonates deeply with the spirit of Israel, a nation that rises from the ashes with unwavering determination. In the face of destruction, Israel responds with construction. In the depths of despair, it finds strength in unity. We are a nation of survivors, warriors of light in a world plagued by darkness. Together we will continue to shine bright. Orit Mark Ettinger's journey through grief is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is always light to guide us forward. We are honored to present to you tonight a heroine of our nation, Orit Mark Ettinger.
All right, we'll now for the next 2 minutes read Kina number 11. And we're going to now skip the next kinna, and we're going to turn to kinna number 13. Kinna number 13 is Eiko. So this is what happened to the brachos. What happened to the host of Baruch Hu, it's Bnei Yisrael. This is the brachos that we have. And the real question is one of the big questions that we have on Tisha B'Av. Rabbi J.J. Schechter likes to talk about this idea a lot on this kinna and others. Is why when did Bnei Yisrael's blood become so cheap? It says, where is the merit of Ko Amar Kore's law of Betzach? So where's the merit of the word Ko from the blessing of Kohanim? Ko, or so shall you bless Bnei Yisrael, the promise to our fathers Avram at the covenant between the parts. And so you shall to your offspring always as numerous as the stars. Below now how my bones are shallow, swallowed up by murderously. Why, O God, have you abandoned us for what seems like an eternity? This is very short, but very powerful. Oh, okay. Okay, so we'll just read this kinna quickly for 2 minutes. Again, it's a longer kinna. We're not going to finish it in 2 minutes, but we'll read 2 minutes worth of the kinna. What happened? Why is our blood so cheap? Eiko. Cool. Okay, the next kinna is powerful. So, in tochel nashim peria olad tefufim. It's just unheard of, this idea that women would be starving to the degree that they would eat their children. It's just unheard of. It just talks about how low we really went as a nation, and the suffering that we had to endure throughout the generations. It's terrible. Everything we're dealing with now is just awful. In Jewish history, we've dealt with such terrible, terrible things. I saw this article in the Jerusalem Post. It says, October orphans. Who cares for Israelis' children whose parents were killed by Hamas? A grassroots organization started in the aftermath of October 7th called the Israeli Children's Fund had its own They estimated that 387 people under the age of 25 in Israel had lost one parent. They cite 29 children in the cohort who has lost both parents, slightly less than the welfare ministry's total of 31. These numbers do not include those who lost their parents serving in Israeli security forces. The United States local security agent working in Gaza border community October 7th were part of the army, even if they were volunteers. It's very powerful thinking about those people whose lives were all shattered, and these children who lost all their parents. Children's lives. If you look back at the Holocaust, so the story says when the liberation came, most of the surviving prisoners headed for the warehouses of Auschwitz, where were bulging with loot, the former possessions of murdered victims. The survivors stormed these warehouses, grabbing whatever they could. Only one group took no part in the raid. These were former Beis Yaakov students. Even in their giddy moments of liberation, when everybody was drunk with relief and thought first of regaining whatever material objects they could grab, these young women just went on caring for others and saving lives as they had all along. Then they discovered on the campgrounds a block full of children. The murderers didn't have time to kill them. There were even infants in this block brought to Auschwitz from all over Europe. The mothers had been murdered, and their babies were now left with no one to nurture them. The girls who discovered these children immediately set about caring for their needs, and they kept doing so until the camp was closed down for good and the children were on their way to foster families. When you think about all the suffering and the pain that happened to the life of children, and then people had to grow up without a family that we many times take for granted. So I spoke about this in 13, and I was been weighing the whole time whether or not I should go on to this theme as well in here. But this is such powerful. It's living l'chaim, and it talks about the pain of losing a child. I edited it. It's a long video, so I really cut it down. But I wanted to hear how people address this. How do they move on? How do they deal with such trust loss? So I'll let the video speak for itself.
There was like a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling. It was horrible.
You try every single thing that you can. You try different doctors. You call other countries.
Kosh Baruch Hu puts you in situations and you follow what the Gedolim tell you to do and you get through it.
Nobody should have to know from this kind of tsar.
My name is Maya Namdar. I have 4 beautiful kids. A very normal, typical family, like the hustle of dinner and homework and arguing and screaming and loving and vacations and just regular, really normal family. December 10, 2021 was the Sternberg reunion. Sternberg is a sleepaway camp that Liel went to for the first time that previous summer. And because we live in Great Neck and it's quite a schlep to the 5 towns, so she decided to go to her friend's house for Shabbat. When Shabbat was out, Liel actually FaceTimed me while she was packing her bag. And she was giggly and all happy and excited to go to the reunion. She was telling me a little bit about Shabbat and how it was with the girls. And, I was like, have the best time. See you tomorrow. And I think it was around 1 a.m. We were sleeping and we heard the doorbell ring. My husband, the first thing he did, he ran to the window because it's 1 o'clock in the morning, so who would be ringing your doorbell? And he sees our best friend, he's an Hatzalah guy, and he sees his truck, and we saw another Hatzalah truck and a few other cars. So my husband ran downstairs to open the door. From then, everything is like a blur. It's a blur. I remember there was like a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling. My son came downstairs, he passed out, Natalie couldn't breathe. Hatzalah came in, it was horrible. It was horrible. Like I thought I was dead.
Well, people in this community are devastated. They're mourning the loss of.
Year Tisha Bav was the first Tisha Bav that I felt the pain and the longing of like wanting our Shechina like next to us so badly, and like dreaming of what it would be when the Beit HaMikdash gets rebuilt. Like I never, ever in all my years felt that. What I did feel was hunger and, waiting to break the fast. But never have I felt such connection. And, those who lost close family members, parents, kids, friends, someone that's very loved and close, I feel like these are the people that can really connect to the day on Tisha B'Av. It's a real loss. It's a real thing.
It was actually in Eretz Yisrael. I was saying Kaddish for my daughter. So I went into a shul maybe 10, 15 minutes before Ma'ariv. So I sat down to wait, and I was sitting there, and looked at the table, there was a few svarim. I picked up the Reishus Chachma, and I opened it up to that week's parasha, which was Parashat Tetzaveh. And something caught my eye. He quotes Zohar that says that every kli in the Mishkan is keneged an Ever Shel Adam, corresponds to one of the limbs of a person. The Aron, which is the most significant thing in the entire Mishkan and the Kodesh Kodashim, is keneged the Leiv Shel Adam. Just like the heart, everything revolves around the heart of a person. It's in the center. The Aron gives kochos to everything else. Everything else in the Mishkan surrounded the Aron. And then the thought hit me. What was in the Aron? What was placed in it was the luchos that came down, that Moshe brought down, the second luchos that remained whole, and also shivri luchos, the pieces of luchos that Moshe broke, the first luchos, that when he came down, he saw Klai, saw with the Chet Egel, he broke it into pieces. So the pieces were in there with the Aron itself. And everyone asked this question, why the shivri luchos? The shivri luchos broke, the letters went up to Shamayim. So there are many answers given to this, but the answer came to me. I said, you know what the idea is? If the Zohar says that the Aron is connected to Leiv Shel Adam, maybe that's the message that Hashem is sending Klai Yisrael. That just like the Aron had room for luchos and the pieces of the broken luchos, and there's room for both, so too the heart of a person, the Leiv of an Adam, has room for shivri luchos and for luchos. It has room for the broken part of it, as well as plenty of room for everything else that's there. And all the things that life has to offer, and all the wonderful things, and the simchas, and the brachos, and the nachas, and all the things that the life brings with it. And they are side by side together. And it's not a stira, it's not a contradiction. So, it's the same thing. In the Neshama, they carry in your heart the person you lost, the child that you lost, or the spouse that you lost, or something. It's there. But there's room for everything else. And that is something that really gives you a lot of chizuk.
Tamar's yard site is coming up Sunday night. And I remember being in shul on Shabbos, and somebody said to me during the Shiva week, we're all in Avelis together. Meaning we have our own personal Avelis, but it's all part of Klal Yisrael's Avelis, especially leading up to Tisha Bav. And we hope and pray, and now I pray even more so, that Hashem will end this Gola soon, and that soon we can have the ability and privilege to go up to Yerushalayim and offer karbanos, daven by the third Beis HaMikdash soon in our day.
So there's an incredible medrash in Eicha. Every Yiddish tzaras, both national, both individual, it all stems from Churban Beis HaMikdash. If there was no Churban Beis HaMikdash, there would be no national tzara, there would be no individual tzara. There wouldn't be terrorist attacks or people dying on the hands of enemies of Klal Yisrael. So when we say we are davening for the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, it's not just to have a building to bring karbanos to daven to end wars for Klal Yisrael, to end all the tzaras in Klal Yisrael.
Those who are lucky that they have not lost a loved one, that they can just connect to the day and really feel the pain of the loss of the Beit HaMikdash not just feel the pain of a loss, to feel also loss and hope. We're gonna have a Shekhinah here, like the world is gonna be beautiful, and act upon it. What do I need to do to make it happen faster? Like, what do we need to do? What are we lacking? What is the world lacking?
Now is a very particular time. So many people have lost parnasa. Some people are suffering financially. Incredible pain, and it's out there in the streets, and people channel all their pain into Churban Beis HaMikdash. There's no way HaKadosh Baruch Hu could not say, I'm going to rebuild. Now's the end. I'm bringing the Beis HaMikdash back this year.
Okay, well now, sorry. Okay, we'll go back to somebody who was children who were lost in October 7th. Gidon and Noah, siblings from the community known as Achutz Barak, attended the Nova festival together near Kibbutz Re'im. On a fateful Shabbos morning, Noah sent a distressing message to her mother, Avia Allah. Mom, there are sirens, missiles are being launched. We're safe for now. We'll talk later when we're in a secure location. 15 minutes later, Gidon spoke to his partner, Alina. We're under fire. We're fleeing. I'll get in touch with you once we're out of danger. Tragically, both were reported missing for 11 agonizing days until their bodies were finally identified. Noah, 27, was one of the young girls born in the community. She served as a paramedic and graduated with honors from Tel Hai College. Gidon was 24 years old, served as a combat soldier in the Givati Brigade. After his release, he traveled the world and established Party Line Radio Berlin, which brings DJs from around the world to Israel. He lives for music, the nightlife, and the clubs. He's a lively guy who brings joy and connects people, share the aunt, Tzivia Hayal. Despite the age gap, they shared a strong bond. Both of them had passion for outdoor parties and would attend them together with their friends. The aunt added, it feels like the safest option without any worry or fear. However, once their parents received the devastating news, their lives were forever changed. The entire family is now shattered. Gidon was named after his late grandfather, who passed away only 38 years ago. 38. On his tombstone, the inscription reads, nothing is impossible, a phrase that Noah and Gidon also chose to etch onto their bodies. This motto had become their enduring legacy. They are determined to heal and seek justice, relentlessly pursuing their quest for revenge, driven by the belief that nothing is beyond reach. We'll now spend 2 minutes to read Kina number 17. Im Tachu Nashim Priya. Okay. In the next Kina, so people ask me in shul which kinos should they do. I actually switch it up each year. I do add different ones, to change them a little bit, to see different ones and get some various themes on this. This is kina number 20. Here it says, "Incline your ear, my God, to the licentious ones who blaspheme, saying, whom do I have to fear in heaven? And hear the roaring of the enemy to declare, destroy, destroy, onto the foundations of the gatehouses, gateway to heaven. Incline your ear, my God, the gathering of those who speak foolishness, full of falsehoods against the righteous one." Now we are experiencing this today. We see that the people are lying against us and attacking us, and their idea is to destroy us. I think the picture on the right says it. Israel, your days are numbered. For world peace, Israel must be destroyed. This is the idea that is being pushed out in the world. I mentioned Benny Netanyahu when he was a student, 28 years old. This video was taken. It pops up and then it gets deleted every once in a while on the internet. It will all of a sudden show up and then it disappears almost as soon as it does. It's not easy to find. But here he is when he was younger, and I'll let him speak for himself.
My first witness, Mr. Benjamin Natai.
Mr. Natai, welcome to the Advocate.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Mr. Natai is a graduate of MIT. He is an Israeli, and he is a man who has written widely on this question before the House tonight. Mr. Natai, is the issue of self-determination the core of the conflict in the Middle East?
No, I don't believe it is. The real core of the conflict is the unfortunate Arab refusal to accept the state of Israel. And I think, as was mentioned earlier, for 20 years the Arabs had both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And if self-determination were, as they now say, the core of the conflict, they could have easily established a Palestinian state then, but they didn't.
When did the issue arise then?
Well, for 20 years, we didn't hear a word about self-determination. And in fact, what we did hear, those of us living in the Middle East, was about driving the Jews into the sea. Now, after 1967, under the leadership of the PLO, the hardline strategy shifted to adopting a moderate, dressed-up slogan, which now talked in terms of first a secular democratic state and then replaced it with Palestinian self-determination. But what this really means, contrary to what Mr. Aruri said about 1977 being a changed year in the PLO's objectives, let me quote you what the PLO Information Office said in a Dutch paper in 1977, in May 5th.
77?
May 5th, 1977, yes. The statement was very simple. Our objective remains the destruction of the Zionist state of Israel. So let's keep in mind that what we're talking about here is not the attempt to build a state, but to destroy one.
Do the Palestinians have a right to a separate state?
Well,
Mr. Jam has been talking about human rights.
Well, I think that no, I don't think they do, but I think that it's quite instructive that the Palestinians who are invoking the right of self-determination, which is an attribute for separate nations, themselves are the ones who define themselves as part of the Arab nation. Now, no one is denying that there are Palestinian Arabs. There's a very distinguished Palestinian Arab sitting right next to me. But the Palestinians themselves, in the Palestinian National Covenant, the very first article, say that the people of Palestine, quote, are part of the Arab nation. Well, let's look at the Arab nation. It has 21 states, an area roughly the size of the United States, and 1/6 of the entire world's wealth. Now, add to that the fact that there already exists a Palestinian state, and that is Jordan, 60% of whose population is Palestinian. I think it's quite interesting that Yasser Arafat and King Hussein, who are bitter enemies, agree on one thing, that Jordan is a Palestinian state. So what we're talking about is a demand for a 22nd Arab state and a second Palestinian state.
What should be done with the Palestinians on the West Bank? It's a problem, so what should be done about it, in your opinion?
Well, I think that the Palestinians in the West Bank are going to be offered the full human rights, the full civil rights, as no Arabs are offered in the Middle East. No Arabs whatsoever have any full human rights or the right to vote for their own government. Those Arabs who lived in Israel in the pre-67 boundaries are the only Arabs in the Middle East who offer that right, and I'm all in favor of having the same Arabs living in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip being offered such a right in the final peace agreement.
Can we have peace in the Middle East?
Very briefly, please.
Yes, I sincerely hope so. Look, I'm 28 years old. I've had to defend my country in 2 wars and in many battles. Nobody wants peace more than Israel. But the stumbling block to the road for peace is this demand for a PLO state, which will mean more war, which will mean more violence in the Middle East. And I sincerely believe, if this demand is abandoned, we can have real and genuine peace.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kagan.
My first witness.
Now we all see what's happening on the college campuses. So never again is really now. Before we read the Kina, show this quick video.
We cannot protect your children because the president of Columbia University will not speak out.
People were hiding their Jewish Stars of David or high necklaces, different kind of like things that show their Judaism on the outside.
Anti-Israel protests at the moment have grown beyond control. Unfortunately, even professors are involved.
This is not new, what we're seeing in campuses. This has been brewing for 30 years.
Who's behind the university riots in America? The Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamic organization with a political approach to Islam. Billions of dollars have been spent establishing chairs on university campuses by the Muslim Brotherhood.
We have institutions, and these institutions are responsible for the safety of everyone, Jews and non-Jews.
Everybody, my card has been deactivated. This is Cass Holloway, the COO. This is Gerald Lewis.
Let him in! Let him in!
My goal, and I think the goal of all of us Jewish people in the diaspora, is to shake up the institutions, not violently and peacefully, but shake them up so they wake up to what's happening and start actually fighting this. Because if we don't fight this now, we know where this ends.
We have to wake up, call something for what it is. This is Jewish hatred. They've warped it. This is a mutating virus of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism always hides itself in a social justice cause. And if we don't see it for what it is, then we can't deal with it for what it is.
The riots on the campuses of America are being funded and organized by Israel haters from throughout the globe. What in the world has happened to America and moral sanity?
The reason we have such an important role as educators, and especially in educating about the Holocaust, is not so much just to remember and commemorate what happened, but also to identify the processes, the signals, the points that allowed this to happen. Because when we say never again, we mean it. We mean never again. And how do we make sure that this never happens again?
There are times you need to be brave and stand up with the truth, and we're asking everyone to take a firm stand in the current war of good versus evil and say aloud, we stand with Israel.
Never again is not merely a refrain, it is a clarion call to action.
We must take an active part in shaping Columbia's future and the U.S. higher education in general. We cannot just sit idly by and hope for hate to go away.
Okay, we'll now do the next Kina, number 20 for the next 2 minutes.
We cannot protect your children.
I didn't read the about the person who was lost, so we'll read this before the next kina. Rotam Calderon, 66, was murdered by a Hamas terrorist in her home in Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. She was home alone when the Hamas invasion began and messaged friends and family that she was trying to hold the door to her reinforced room closed for hours. For 2 weeks after the attack, Rotam was considered missing until her body was located and identified. Rotam was buried on October 23rd in Kibbutz Reveim, a little over a week after what would have been her 67th birthday. She's survived by 3 children, Adam, Omar, and Mika, and 3 grandchildren, Aviv, Gal, and Bar, and her older brothers, Yuval and Raviv. She was predeceased by her husband, Moshe Kaldi, who was killed in a motorcycle accident in 2005. A longtime Be'eri resident, she was born there and remained there until her death, save for her military service in Sharam el Shika. Her studies in the north and 2 years in which she lived in Tel Aviv after her husband was killed. In recent years, she found love again with Baruch, who lived in Hatzor, and often spent weekends together. Rotam worked for many years in education, first at the local high school and later as a director of the kibbutz early childhood education. In a statement, the education ministry said, Rotam was an excellent and active member of our staff and beloved teacher by her students. As a counselor, she knew how to speak with students at eye level and lead them to successful and to security that they had supported support system behind them. The next kina we're going to do is one of the famous kinas, which talks Arze Halvanan, talks about all the Harigei Malchus, all the leaders that we lost. This is not actually didn't happen in real life. It was put together as a kina of all the different tragedy about our various leaders. We also read it on Yom Kippur as well. So what I use this one for is to talk about other types of leaders. And this year, maybe a little controversial, I wanted to take a leader who is not Jewish, but somebody who saved Jewish people, really somebody you never would hear about. And it's not somebody we talk about ever, but somebody who really put her life at risk and saved generations and generations of people. So I'll let you hear the story of Irina Sendler.
Irina Sendler was born to a Catholic family in the city of Otwock, Poland in 1910. When World War II broke out on September 1st, 1939, Irina Sendler was a 29-year-old social worker at the welfare department of the Warsaw municipality. She carried on performing her duties even after the city's occupation by the Germans and took care of hundreds of people in the city who had become poor and homeless as a result of the war. Irina used her position to help the Jews. However, this became impossible once the Warsaw Ghetto was sealed off in November 1940. Roughly 400,000 Jews were packed into a small area occupied by the ghetto. The crowded living conditions, along with the lack of basic sanitation, food, and medicine, led to a very high death rate among the ghetto population. Despite the great risks involved, Irina obtained a permit from her department to visit the ghetto and inspect the sanitation conditions inside. Once she had infiltrated the ghetto, she made contact with Jewish relief organizations and began helping them smuggle Jews out of the ghetto and find places for them to hide in the Aryan part of the city. In the fall of 1942, the Zhigota, the Council to Aid Jews, was established following the deportation of 280,000 Jews from the ghetto to the Treblinka extermination camp. This organization, staffed by both Jewish and non-Jewish operatives, worked to rescue Jews. Irina became a prominent activist in the council, helping Jews who had survived the deportations from the ghetto to find hiding places, even providing them with food and medical supplies. The rescue operations undertaken by Irina and her fellow council members were daring and complex. Babies and small children were sedated and smuggled out in bags, baskets, suitcases, and even vegetable crates in the ghetto hospital's supply truck. Older children were extricated in various disguises or through the sewer system, which also served smugglers and the Jewish resistance. The ghetto ambulances carried both children and adults out of the ghetto on stretchers, under the pretense that they had contracted typhoid, tuberculosis, and other infectious diseases that the Germans were averse to. In September 1943, approximately 4 months after the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the ghetto's subsequent demolition, Irina was appointed as head of the Department for the Care of Jewish Children at the Żegota. Under the pseudonym Jolanta, Irina used her connections with orphanages and other institutions caring for abandoned children to send them Jewish children equipped with forged documents, all at great risk to herself. Many of the children were sent to the Regina Mari orphanage in Warsaw and to religious institutions in the Warsaw and Lublin regions. For Jewish children to fit into a Polish environment, they had to be prepped, which meant leaving behind their Jewish birth names, identities, and families, adopting Christian names, and becoming fluent in Polish. Most importantly, the children had to learn Christian prayers and rituals, and assume new Christian identities. Sometimes, the institutions themselves set certain conditions, and in many instances, the children were baptized and made Catholic. Irina made sure to keep precise records of the children sent to these institutions so that they could be located after the war and returned to their families. By doing so, Irina saved the lives of many hundreds of children. Their exact number is unknown. It is important to remember that the danger was not limited to the Germans. There were also local informants who, motivated by financial reward or by their own anti-Semitism, would disclose the locations of rescued Jews and their Polish rescuers alike. Therefore, the survivors often had to be moved from place to place, from house to house, from apartment to convent, or from town to village and back again. Every such transfer involved more people, and so increased the risk of exposure, informing upon, or betrayal, as well as the danger that one of those involved would get caught and give away the others. On October 20th, 1943, after a month of widespread activity, Irina was arrested. Prior to her arrest, she had managed to hide incriminating evidence, such as the coded addresses of some of the children's whereabouts, as well as evidence of large sums of money paid to some of the hosts. She was sentenced to death, but was eventually released in February 1944 after members of the resistance managed to bribe clerks. The arrest did not deter her, and immediately after her release, she resumed her clandestine activity, even though she knew the authorities were aware of her activity. She continued her operations on behalf of the Jews. At one point, the need for secrecy even prevented her from attending her mother's funeral. Over the years, she received numerous recognitions for her heroic conduct during the Holocaust. After the war, Irina worked for the Ministry of Health in Poland. On October 19, 1965, Yad Vashem recognized Irina as a righteous among the nations, and a tree was planted in her honor at the entrance to the Avenue of the Righteous Among the Nations at Yad Vashem.
Okay, we'll now read Kina number 21, Arzei Alvanon, Adirei Torah, next 2 minutes. Okay, so the next kina is it was made for the crusade, but being that this year is what happened to us on October 7th, so we're going to read the kina for Derry. But before that, now there's a few different keynotes for what happened in Israel. I put in the chat the keynote from Rav Rimon. We are not actually going to read that one. I'm not going to do that. I left it for you if you would like to read it, because I have something I think a little bit more powerful, a different keynote that was produced into a song. But before that, to introduce what went on, there was a very powerful speech given by Florida State Representative Randy Fine. And so I'd like to play that before we introduce the kina. And it's going to be a song. There was music made to the kina, and that's really why I picked it, because Reverend Ramon's is the kina that we would just read. But here somebody put a song to the kina on Berry. So we'll listen to that song and follow along with the kina. But first we'll have Representative Fine.
Mr. Speaker and Madam President, thank you for organizing this today. Paul, I'm profoundly honored to represent not only the House, but the Jewish community as we stand together. I've tried to speak for them for 7 years. I've clearly not done a good enough job. I start with an apology. I'm not myself. Jews are not ourselves. We are not okay. Most of us have hardly slept since last Saturday. We have family in Israel. We know someone who's serving in the military. We know someone who died. For Israel, 10/7 was the equivalent, proportionally, not to 1 9/11, or 2, or even 10. Imagine 40,000 had died in New York that day. Almost 200 people have been taken hostage. 200. Think about that. We don't see them on live news videos because they're being hidden, used as human shields. Imagine what's being done to them right now. Until last Saturday, for most of us in this room, the Holocaust was something that existed in history books and museums, in black and white photographs when we watched Schindler's List and we read Anne Frank's diary. But not anymore. It turns out that the Holocaust never ended. It just went into hibernation. In the past week, we have seen things that have shaken the very foundation of what it means to be a human being. I can't wrap my head around what could drive a person to take a knife and cut the head off a baby. Can you? Can you understand what kind of person would burn an elderly person alive? That happened. What kind of man rapes a girl as she lays next to her dead friends? When I try to sleep, I think of the babies I played with last December when I toured a kibbutz on the border with Gaza. I wonder which ones were beheaded. That's the kibbutz that I visited. If I think about it too much, I feel like I'm going crazy, and I don't know if it's from anger or grief or just questioning how this world can actually exist this way. If I do fall asleep, I dream of the video of 2 little boys being taken hostage by monsters. I haven't seen their faces, but I saw their hair. 2 little redheads. If you come to my office, you can see a picture of 2 that I have at home that have that exact same red hair. They want to kill them too. What we have seen is horrific, scarring, traumatizing. But I ask you to look at the pictures. Do not look away. We preserved the Nazi concentration camps in order to memorialize the horrors that man can do. Don't look away. In some ways, this was worse. These terrorists wore GoPro cameras. They filmed their barbarity live, their animalism. They were proud of what they had done. Do not look away. I ask you to sear it into your minds, to change who you are and what you think, because we have to face a truth that many of us have refused to for far too long. We are not one giant human family. There are monsters among us. This was not done by one crazy person, or even 19, as happened at 9/11. Thousands entered Israel 10 days ago with one single purpose. It wasn't to free Gaza. It was to see how many children they could kill, how many families they could destroy, how much suffering and barbarity they could inflict. That wasn't the collateral damage of war. That was their goal. But the monsters aren't just over there. They are right here. Today, a group of them will gather not far from here, and they will call the beheading of babies a great win. They will celebrate it. They will justify it. The monsters aren't just over there. Turn on the news, and you will see both in this country and around the world the largest scale demonstration of anti-Semitism in the history of the world. They no longer feel the need to hide their desire to kill Jews. They scream it in front of the camera. You all need to understand that Jews, not just in Israel, but right here in Florida, do not feel safe today. We are a people that has been kicked out of every place we've ever lived for 2,000 years. Every single place. There are Jews that you represent right now, here in Florida, including this one, whose children secretly packed a suitcase under their beds, wondering, will they have to run? But more than tired, more than heartbroken, more than scared, I'm angry. Because while we are here to stand with Israel, let me make one thing very clear. This is not war against a different people in a faraway land. It was an attack on all of us. There is a slogan in radical Islam that the terrorists sometimes use. Today, we come for the Saturday people. Tomorrow, we come for the Sunday people. There are only 16 million Jews in the world. There are fewer Jews than there are residents of Beijing, China. We celebrate the Sabbath on Saturday. Maybe one of you can tell me who celebrates it on Sunday. I'm exceedingly grateful for my colleagues who stand here. For most of them, this is hard to understand. The biggest problem with anti-Semitism is actually not the anti-Semites. It's with those who aren't, because those who aren't anti-Semites don't understand how people can feel this way. It's the most common thing I've heard as I've run these bills for 7 years. From my colleagues, they say, who actually believes this stuff? But we've learned that they do. I want to share just one story that might help explain it. A story you haven't heard yet about a little Jewish girl who survived, a 3-year-old named Lizzie. Lizzie was one of 11 children in a family in her village when on that fateful day, the barbarians arrived at the gate. They were playing outside. Out of nowhere, they showed up. As the monsters were running at them, weapons flashing in the sun, Lizzie and her brothers and sisters and her parents ran into their home. They tried to barricade the door, but the terrorists knocked it down. With nowhere to run, Lizzie, her 10 siblings, and her parents piled on top of each other, trying to protect themselves. Lizzie, the smallest, ended up on the bottom, her parents on top. And over what felt like eternity, Lizzie listened to her family get slaughtered. She heard the knives plunge into the bodies of her parents. She heard the screams of her brothers and sisters as they died. Their blood poured into her eyes, her ears, her nose. She thought she was going to drown in it. When the monsters had finished their butchery, thinking they'd killed them all, they left. Lizzie survived. 8 of her older Jewish brothers and sisters, her mother and her father, they were true human shields, real human shields, who sacrificed their own lives to save Lizzie and her siblings, who sat at the bottom of this pile of death. But with the weight of hundreds of pounds on top of them, it took Lizzie and her brother hours to disentangle themselves from the bodies of their family. They just weren't strong enough to move it away. Lizzie remembered the heat leaving their bodies as she lied there, as they grew cold. It felt like their souls were moving on. But Lizzie survived. Not in Israel, but in Russia. Not 10 days ago, but more than 100 years ago. You see, the armies of darkness have tried to exterminate my people since time immemorial. Lizzie survived. She came to America, and in this country, she married and had 2 Jewish children, one of whom had 2 more. My grandmother would remind me of her story every time I had to deal with my own battles with anti-Semitism. She would remind me that I wasn't special. I was just a Jew. The sad thing is this story is not unique. Last Saturday was just the latest stop on a 3,000-year journey of Jewish hatred, from slavery in Egypt to the Spanish Inquisition, to the pogroms, to the Holocaust. And I could tell you dozens more if we had all day. Every Jew in this room has a story like mine. Ask them, and they will tell you. They will tell you of the dozens, if not hundreds, of cousins that might have been brought into this world had they not died. There are hundreds of millions of Jews who have never been born. But 16 million is still too many for the monsters among us. We have been persecuted since the days of Exodus, the story of Passover, the story of Jews escaping from slavery in Egypt, of surviving chase from Pharaoh's army, of spending 40 years in the desert searching for the land God promised us, Israel. When we end our Seders each year, we end them with a simple saying, next year in Jerusalem. For over 1,000 years, that was just a hope and a dream, but not anymore. Since 1948, no longer. We now have Israel. Never again will Jews be defenseless. Never again will we go to our slaughter. Never, ever again. God knew this. And in one of the 5 most sacred books in our faith, Deuteronomy, a book that is part of the Christian Bible as well, he told us what to do. When you go out to war against your enemies and you see a people more numerous than you shall not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God is with you. Hear, O Israel, today you are approaching the battle against your enemies. Let your hearts not be troubled. You shall not be afraid, and you shall not be alarmed, and you shall not be terrified. For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. God is with us. We are not afraid. We know we will win. We will win together. You are with us. We all share this verse as well from Psalms. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. The attack in Israel was not an attack on a country. It was an attack on a people. It was an attack on me, on Lauren, on every Jew in this room, but it was an attack against all of us. When you stand with Israel, you stand with us. You stand with the Jews of this state, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and the namesake of my youngest son, or my oldest son, Jacob. All of you descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as well. May God bless Israel, may God bless her friends, and may God smite the enemies of us all.
So now we'll, instead of the Kina, we're not going to read Kina 25. Instead, we're going to read the Kina. This is Kina from Be'eri, and so there was a song written to it. So we'll listen to the song and follow along. Here I have the Rav Rimon Kina. I put it in the chat. Before I saw I only did it to the individual, so I put it for everybody. If you go on YouTube, he talks about it for 1 minute, just very, very quickly, the Kina, but he just explains why he wrote a Kina. But there's not really much on it. It's pretty new Kina. But here's a song for this Kina.
ונהפך שירי, אני נובע מים מעומק שברי. איך התורה ערוכה וסדורה, וכל פארה לא עמד לעזרה, וביום הדרה הושחת את הרים, אני נובע מים מעומק שברי. תרפא שברי, ואני הנובעת תשקה בארי, ואני הנובעת תשקה בארי.
Very powerful, and that's why I chose to do the song. But please read River Milne's as well at a different time. So next, we'll actually sing a song together. This is the Lamed Aleph, and this is the B'tzeisi Mitzrayim B'tzeisi Yerushalayim, May Yerushalayim, that it compares that the happiness that we had when we left Egypt to the sadness that we had when we were thrown out of Yerushalayim. And the kina, like we try in Tisha Bav, is not only have the sadness, but try to leave us with some hope at the very end. As we struggle through this today, all the tragedies, We do have hope for the future and try to come up with an idea of how we're going to go on. So the song is like this: H2 kad bekir bi bahalosi ali bi bitsesi mi mitzrayim, and feel free to join along. Kinim, and then it goes down in sound. Kinim ayiralaman azkira bitsesi mirushalayim. And it goes up. Az yashir Moshe shir lo yinash bitsesi mi mitzrayim v'yachonen yirmiyav v'nananeinenya bitsesi mirushalayim. V'esi hiskonan v'shachananan bitsesi mi mitzrayim. The Hamas al Shechna alai ka'anana b'tzeisi Yerushalayim Dalayam Ramo v'chachom makamo k'tzeisi mimitzrayim Zadunim shatafu ve'al roshi tzafu b'tzeisi Yerushalayim Digan shamayim itzoyezu mayim b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Ano merorim umayim amarim b'tzeisi mirushalayim Ashken v'arev tzivot ha'kore b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Kore bel al maros pavel b'tzeisi mirushalayim Amar kvod Adonai ke'eshol cheles lefanai b'tzeisi mimitzrayim V'cherev l'tusha Uletevach netusha b'tzeisi mirushalayim Zevach mincha v'shemen amishcha b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Zegula selekucha kitzon letivcha b'tzeisi mirushalayim Chagim v'shabbat sosu mopesim ve'ostos b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Tanis ve'evel r'dofa hevel b'tzeisi mirushalayim Tavu halim la'arba degalim b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Ale yishmaelim achanos arelim b'tzeisi mirushalayim Yovel u'shmita ve'eret shel keita b'tzeisi mimitzrayim Machar l'tznisus v'charus v'chasus b'tzeisi mirushalayim Kapores ve'aron v'avnei zifraron b'tzeisi mimitzrayim v'avnei Hakala Uchle Abala B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Levim V'Haronim V'Shivim V'Kenim B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Nogshim Umonim Umochrim V'Konim B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Moshe Yireinu V'Aaron Yireinu B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Nebuchadnezzar V'Adraya Notzke Sar B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Narach Melchama V'Adonai Shama B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Rachach Mimenu V'nei Einenu B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Sisrei Paro Ches V'Sidrei Marech Ches B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Chema Neteches V'alai Sochech Ches B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Olas V'achim V'Ishe Nechochim B'tzeisi Mitzrayim V'cherev Mizuva Karim V'nei Tzion HaYikarim B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Parei Givos L'chavod Nefos B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Shrikos Tzruos V'kolos V'zavos B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Tzitza Zahav HaMeshal El Rahav B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Ushlach Nezar V'afes Ezer B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Kedusha U'nevuah V'chavod Adonai Yirah B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Nigala Umara V'ruach HaTumah B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Rina V'Yeshua V'chatzos Ros HaTeruah B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Zakas Olalo V'nakas Chalal B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Shulchan Menorah V'chalil Torah B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Alil V'soeva U'pesel HaMatzeva B'tzeisi Yerushalayim Torah U'uda U'chlei HaChemda B'tzeisi Mitzrayim Sasan V'simcha V'nasyagon V'anacha B'shuvi Yerushalayim. The next kinna is we have a whole bunch of kinnos on Israel and Yerushalayim, on Sion. So just it's a little yeshivish. It's very short. It's short, a little yeshivish. But listen to Rav Aaron Lopiansky on this kinna.
Say small akdama to the next kinnis, then we'll continue. It's late. We'll continue with the kinnis ourselves. We'll then afterwards we'll say the two kinnis on the churban of the Feirapa and then the Litzia. I wanted to just we'll talk this kinna of Tzion of Sisha Asirayach. All of the next few kinnis start with Tzion. They beika deal with the beauty of Tzion, with the light of Tzion, and everything that Beis Hamikdash has to offer, with Eretz Yisrael and so on. The first one, especially Rabbi Levi's, it's incredible in the way it really excites the heart of a person. We always say that it's very important because everyone holds Eretz Yisrael, but understanding what Eretz Yisrael is, what the Makam is, what it means to us, is very important. I want to end with a story, the Chashivas about saying this, but a different story. It's also about a Nevardika. This was, the Nevardikas were in Russia, and they were sent off to Siberia. A lot of them perished in Siberia. And also with tremendous stories of Mesiras Nefesh. And there was one person, the name given is Shalom Kiver. Kiver in Europe, they called people by the name of the city he came from. So I don't know what his name was. Shalom Kiver. And he was sent to Siberia, and he managed to bring tefillin with him. He was able to keep it for a while, and one day they searched really hard. They found his tefillin, and they took it away from him. And the next morning, he took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeve, and he said, "Hinni muchanim zuman lekayim mitzvahs tefillin." Pause a moment. He said, "Rebbeinu Shalom, you know how much I tried and wanted to have this tefillin, and the Shem took it from me. May my tsar and my gaguim for it be ki'ilu sheinachti tefillin b'chol dikdukei of kol prateha." We don't have a lot. There's a lot we don't have. The tsar, the feeling that we are ready to do it, we can't, is a yiratzin, kilu kiamti, and so on. Everything about that, everything, all the oitzvus of Torah and mitzvahs that are kosher and kolol from Eretz Yisrael to Beis Hamikdash, to everything with it. At least, if we say it, and we are some level of gagua, and again, Rabbi Levi's kinnis are incredible. To be able to picture what it is to live in a world that's fused with Das Hashem, Das Elokim, and everything with it. That's our outstretched arm. It's something in as much as emotionally, mentally, we shtal to it. May that be ki'ilu we will mekayim what we need to be mekayim.
It's very powerful what he's saying is that we may not be able to do everything. We're not in Eretz Yisrael. We're not there fighting. We're not there with we're afraid for Eretz Yisrael, we're afraid for our loved ones. We're not there though, physically. And so, but at least we should have the desire, to be a part of everything. And that's a level. There's a certain level of just wanting to it, really, really wanting to it, and realizing our limitations that we can't have it. We may not, he doesn't have the tefillin in front of him, but just the desire to want it, not to say, "Oh wow, I'm pater from it, so therefore great." Okay, I don't have to do it. Thank God, I don't have to do that. I would do it, of course, if it was here, I would do it, but I don't have to do it, so I'm free. Like I tell people who are doctors who who they're not keeping Shabbos. It's okay. So you may be putter from Shabbos. You may, you have something else. You have an emergency and you have to drive over there. So, but you should desire the Shabbos. You should feel sad about that and desire it and want the Shabbos. And it's just, all right, I have no choice. I have no choice, but there should be there should be the desire for it and understand it. Because if somebody is, yes, they could do all the doctors every week. They could be, have a good reason. It's pikuach nefesh, but in the end of the day, they won't have a Shabbos, and they'll lose Shabbos. And so at least if it have to be in that situation, we should desire it. And so we may not have a base of Mikdash, we may not be in Eretz Israel. There's a lot of things that were lost, but at least we could desire it. So we'll read Kina number 36 for the next 2 minutes. Tzion hala tishali l'shalom asiraya. If you just see the words, it really brings this message, the whole idea of that I would, if you had the ability to come to Eretz Israel, fall on my face upon your soil and intensely cherish your stones and favor your dust. You have the ability to go to Eretz Israel. We do go to Eretz Israel. And, there used to be that people would come and they kiss the ground. You can understand it. This was the idea that Jews had for thousands of years, that, that maybe they weren't there, but they would, their heart was there and they really prayed to be there. The next kinna is the kinna for the Holocaust. I actually was debating a lot whether or not I should show this video, because just how long everything is. But I decided this morning even to put back in this video. I had a different video. I changed it out for this one. It's 41 or 42. There's different ones written for the Holocaust. And just to listen, so if you're not, so Arnold Schwarzenegger's father was a Nazi. If you didn't know, his father was a Nazi, and he talks about it, and talks about the hatred and how they viewed us, and and the hatred, and that's part of Tisha B'av is trying to we grasp, but I'll try to understand at all, and what it did to him, what it ended up doing to him, being a Nazi, and the hatred. What we try to do is we have all this also anger. We're hurt. We're angry now, and the anger could consume us and destroy us. And so part of what we do is we write keynotes to be able to express the anger, express the pain that we have and to be able to move on from it. So I think it's really important to hear what he says about his father and his family.
Hello, everybody. I want to talk today about the rising hate and anti-Semitism we've seen all over the world. A few months ago, I toured Auschwitz, the Nazi concentration camp, where 1.1 million men, women, and children were slaughtered. Almost all of them were ruthlessly murdered simply because they were Jewish. When you walk through a place like Auschwitz, you feel a tremendous weight. There are reminders everywhere of the horrors that happened there. The suitcases never claimed by the prisoners, who were told to remember exactly where they left their belongings so they could retrieve them after they were finished with their showers. The shoes and the gold teeth and the hair that were taken from the murdered to be reused by the murderers who funded their evil. The log books with thousands of names crossed out as if a cruel accountant only measured death. The gas chambers with scratches on the walls from the fingernails of people who tried to hold on to life. The crematorium, where the Nazis tried to erase all of the atrocities. Let me tell you something. The weight on your back hits you at the very beginning heavier than any squat I've ever done. And it never goes away. It's the feeling of history, of millions of voices that were silenced decades ago, begging you, not to just look at their shoes, but to spend a few hours in them, to imagine you were there. Because once you imagined that you arrived on that train, and you were sorted into those lines, and you smelled the smoke that didn't smell like any wood you've ever burned before, and you never saw your families coming out of those showers, and then you worked your butt off while getting almost nothing to eat, until it looked more like a ghost than a person. And then when you couldn't work anymore, and they considered you useless, they sent you to the showers too. Once you've spent the time to really think about all of those things, then your imagination has no choice but to start the real work. How do we stop this from ever happening again? After a trip to Auschwitz, you will never question why. Never again is the rallying cry of all of the people who fight to prevent another Holocaust. You will never question that. But today, I don't really want to talk to those people. I don't want to preach to the choir here. Today, I want to talk to the people out there who might have already stumbled into the wrong direction, into the wrong path. I want to talk to you if you've heard some conspiracies about Jewish people or people of any race or gender orientation and thought, that makes sense to me. I want to talk to you if you found yourself thinking about anyone is inferior and out to get you because of their religion or the color of the skin or their gender. I don't know the road that has brought you here, but I've seen enough people throw away their futures for hateful beliefs. So I want to speak to you before you find your regrets on the end of that path. I've talked a lot about my father and the broken man that I was surrounded by when I grew up in Austria after the Second World War. They drank to numb their pain. Their bodies were riddled with injuries and shrapnels from the evil war, and their hearts and their minds were equally riddled with guilt. But besides the guilt and the injuries, they felt like losers, not only because they lost the war, but also because they fell for a horrible loser ideology. They were lied to and misled into a path that ended in misery. Some of them joined the Nazis because they were filled with hate. Some of them joined because they thought they deserved more in their lives. And they bought into that idea that the only way to make their lives better was to make other lives worse. Some of them joined because they were frustrated with the government, and some of them just joined because everyone else was doing it. In the end, it didn't really matter why they joined. They were all broken in the same way. That's the bottom line here. I mean, if you find yourself at the crossroads, wondering if that path of hate might make sense to you for one reason or the other, or even wrapping yourself with a flag of hate, I want you to know where that path ends. I want you to see it very clearly in front of you and in mind. Because throughout history, hate has always been the easy path, the path of least resistance. I get it. And I mean, it's easier to find a scapegoat for a problem than to try to make things better ourselves, right? But let me be clear. You will not find success on the end of that road. You will not find fulfillment or happiness. Because hate burns fast and bright. It might make you feel empowered for a while, but eventually consumes whatever vessel it fuels. It breaks you. It's the path of the weak. And that's why there has never been a successful movement based on hate. I mean, think about that. The Nazis, losers. The Confederacy, losers. The apartheid movement, losers. And the list goes on and on. I don't want you to be a loser. I don't want you to be weak. See, I've spent most of my life helping people find their strength. This is where the action is, strength. And despite all of the things that we may disagree about, and all my friends who might say, Arnold, don't talk to those people. It's not worth it. I don't care what they say. I care about you. I think you're worth it. I know that nobody's perfect. I can tell this firsthand. And I can understand how people can fall into a trap of prejudice and hate. Whether you grow up surrounded by hate or get sucked into by some of big tech's algorithms that push you to the extreme, I can see how it can happen. I think all of us hold some prejudice. There's no two ways about that. And we have to fight it our whole lives. I know this is not the path of least resistance. It's easier to just throw around some bogus science claiming that you're superior to someone else than it is to actually work on becoming better yourself. It's easier to make excuses that the Jewish people conspired to hold you back than it is to admit that you just needed to work harder. It's easier to hate than it is to learn. It's easier when someone challenges you to get hurty feelings and to go and find some echo chamber that will tell you that you're right and they're wrong. But remember, easier isn't better. It isn't. When you spend your life looking for scapegoats, you take away your own responsibility. You remove your own power. You steal your own strength. Nobody who has chosen the easy path of hate has gotten to the end of that road and said, oh, what a life. No, they die as miserably as they lived. No matter how far you've gone, I want you to know that you still have the chance to choose a life of strength. But you have to give up your war against everyone that you hate. Let's give up that war. Whether you hate them because of their color of the skin, or their religion, or their gender, or their sexual orientation, it doesn't matter. Give it up. Give up that war. You know, the war that you have to really fight is the war against yourself. You have to fight the war against yourself. Now, it's not easy to look in the mirror and to change your own life. It's hard as hell. You have to take responsibility. You have to learn new things. You have to feel uncomfortable. Good, because discomfort is how we grow. That's how we become strong. If you run away from discomfort and resistance your whole life, you will always be weak. Just think about the gym, for instance. That's where I learned most of my lessons, right? The muscles only grows from resistance. You have to struggle. You have to build strength. The more I force my hands against that steel bar, the bigger the biceps get and the stronger they get. When I was trying to squat 600 pounds and bench press 500 pounds and deadlift 700, it didn't feel like a walk in the park. It wasn't easy, no. I was uncomfortable. It was painful. I mean, look at those photos. Crying out loud in pain. You know something? Your mind and your character are no different than your body and your muscles. If you want to grow as a person, you really have to make friends with pain. Embrace the discomfort. Enjoy the struggle. You have two paths in front of you right now. One of them is going to be the harder one today. It's going to be downright painful. You will have to force your brain to think in new ways. You might lose some friends who want to hold on to their weak beliefs. But as you pull yourself away from that anger and that hate, eventually you will start to feel empowered. You will realize that you have the greatest power of all, the power of life. You will be stronger than you've ever known. The other path is easy, much easier. You don't have to change anything. Everything in your life that you aren't happy about can be someone else's fault. You can keep fueling yourself on that sugar high of hate. But the end of that road isn't pretty. I've seen it with my own eyes. You will end up broken, searching for ways to numb your pain and your misery. See, I don't want you to go through all of that. It's unnecessary. Let me tell you something. When I walked through that camp in Auschwitz, and I put myself in the shoes of those people herded into those gas chambers, it was horrifying. One of the darkest moments of my life. But in that darkness, a woman who survived the horrors of Auschwitz helped me find the light. I spent some time with her, had a wonderful conversation with her. And she told me that the Nazis could conquer cities and countries. They could take her freedom, her friends, her family, even her life. But they could never conquer her mind. Pfft. What strength that woman had. Wow. So, the bottom line is, I don't care how many hateful things you may have written online. I don't care how often you've marched with carrying that hateful flag, or what hateful things you may have said in anger. There's still hope for you. There's still time for you. Choose strength. Choose life. Conquer your mind. You can do it. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay. I want to give, before we do the kina, we're going to, this is the small, short video song to remember all those who lost their lives, not just on October 7th, but throughout Jewish, Israel, for Israel, all different terror attacks. So it's a little song to remember them. And then I'd like to talk about the people who we lost within our own congregation.
תוליכנו לשלום, תעצידנו לשלום. Oh, another face smiling right through me from the pages of an obituary. I know we have never met, yet I grieve your future lost. I will remember I'm a Jew, so I choose life. I won't let hatred turn me bitter. They can try to stab with blades, to stab with words, but I'm no quitter. I'm a Jew, so I choose life. Circles of song, we sing of hope. When faced with terror, we stand strong. We build our land, yes, we will cope. Another silent cuts into my heart so deep. I wonder who is next to bleed one's future on the street. We pray to God, please guide us safely on the way. Israel is our land, and it's where we're meant to stay. I'm a Jew, so I choose life. I won't let hatred turn me bitter. They can try to stab with blades, to stab with words, Facebook and Twitter. I'm a Jew, so I choose life. Circles of song, we sing of hope. When faced with terror, we stand strong. We build our land, yes, we will cope. I'm a Jew, so I choose life. I won't let hatred turn me bitter. They can try to stab with blades, to stab with words, Facebook and Twitter, I'm a Jew. So I choose life, circles of song, we sing of hope. When faced with terror, we stand strong. We build our land, yes, we will cope. We will remember. We will remember. We must remember.
Okay, so now we'll read a little bit about the people who we lost, and we're going to have we'll read the Kina for the Holocaust just briefly, and then I have how are we going to move on? A very powerful message, video, and it's the two very short videos that to leave us with the thought, and then we'll do Kaylee Teal. George Blau, father of Reuben Blau. George Blau was a young boy. I'll open this up a little more. When World War II broke out, when Russia and Germany split Poland in 1939, George and his parents were shipped off to near Siberia, where they believed they perished under difficult circumstances. He later fled to Jambal in Kazakhstan. After the war, like many survivors, he spent time in displaced persons camp and eventually made his way to a relative in the Bronx. He briefly served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War. With the help of the GI Bill, he somehow matriculated into a graduate engineering program at Columbia University. He loved to boast that it was his first school he ever graduated from. As an engineer, he and his colleagues designed the Kingston Rhinecliff Bridge in Ulster County. He also did some work for NASA on the Apollo program. After about 20 years in New York, he moved to Denver, where he loved to ski and eventually got into real estate. He rarely talked about his youth, always wanted to protect his family and shelter from the horrors that he lived through, and refused to take money from the German government. In Colorado, George was mostly at peace in the mountains, skiing and fishing. On the slopes, he'd often yell in glee as he shot down. He competed in the senior games and frequently won medals. To improve his odds, he'd find competitors with just 3 or 4 competitions with just 3 or 4 people signed up. He was happiest reeling in rainbow trout and talking about some new spots that he found. He was immensely proud of his catches and loved sharing extra ones with his neighbors and friends. In his 80s, he was finally forced to address an old injury that he had in his knee and had his knee replaced. He was worried that it would end his ability to ski. That never happened. His doctor kept a photo of him skiing to show and inspiring other patients. George was a free thinker. He was a voracious reader who took a particular interest in Holocaust memoirs from people who suffered through a similar experience. Personally, he took pride in buying and repairing small shopping centers. He loved to schmooze with all his tenants and quick to dole out business advice. He was generously quick to lend a hand. One time at a Yankee game, he saw a fan in military uniform. He did not think twice about buying a beer fan. Once he was visiting his son Reuven in Brooklyn, he noticed that men from a group from home nearby would come to shul in old and sometimes tattered clothing. He quietly gave the organization money to buy all new suits. Some still wear. On a larger scale, he was instrumental in raising money for Magen David Adom. He was particularly proud of donating an ambulance in honor of his father. And truly regularly fall asleep during the rabbi's sermons, especially as he got older and enjoyed the Chaim at the Kiddush Club. But he also would carefully and slowly read every word of each tefillah. His focus was a true inspiration to those around him. Rachel Weiser's mother, Ethel Friedman. Ethel Friedman was an only child. Taylor was the only child born in the town of Munkac in Slovakia in 1927, spoke 7 languages. At the age of 17, was deported with her parents to Auschwitz. She survived, they didn't. Her parents got married in 1945 and 1949, immigrated to Israel. Her beautiful mother, with a great sense of humor, was an inspiration to the whole family. She lived for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She was thankful to Hashem, even though she had a lot of questions. Dorothy Greenwald, mother of Sharon Cherish. Dorothy Greenwald lived in Passaic Clifton area for 100 years. She passed on her Hebrew birthday. She was an invaluable helpmate to her father, to Sharon's father, working with him in the clothing store in downtown Passaic until it closed in 1995. She was known for her great sense of humor, tremendous energy, loving embrace of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She was an active member of Women's American Oro. She was always on the go, and even into her senior years, she did yoga and jumped rope. Fondly known as Grandma Dot, she is often seen on the floor playing with her great-grandchildren. This is the father of Deborah Landau. Monty Meir Moshe Hutman Zal was well known for his love of his fellow Jews and his friendly disposition. Born in the Merriman's region of Canada, he was part of a larger extended family that established various retail stores focused on clothing sales. His family moved to Montreal while he was a young child to live in a large Jewish community. In 1961, Monty met and married Esther Hutman, and they were inseparable for the following 63 years of marriage. Monty was a proud and dedicated Jew who ensured his 3 children received a Jewish education. He left behind a well-used set of Gemaras from his many years of doing Daf Yomi. Monty loved to go to shul, always arrived on time and sitting up front. He also served the community as a shul gabbai for several years. Monty was the kind of person that always welcomed new faces and often invited them to a Shabbos meal, sparking several decade-long friendships. His natural friendliness served him well in his career in sales, first at the family store and later at the auto parts manufacturer owned by his cousin. Monty was most famous for the joy he took in being at weddings, and no simcha was complete without dance performance by Monty. Everyone in the extended Hutman family stayed very close, and often cousins were best friends. Monty kept ongoing contact with everyone in the family, especially his identical twin brother Harry Zal, whom he shared a special bond. Monty Zadie Hutman is survived by his wife Esther and his children Annie, David, and baby Deborah. He will be sorely missed by so many people. Stan Copps, father of Steve Copps, was born on April 10th, 1943, and grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He attended Ner Yisrael, a prominent yeshiva in Baltimore, which laid a strong foundation for his lifelong commitment to Jewish faith and community. In January 1965, Stan married Carolyn Braunfeld, and they were inseparable duo for 59 years. Stan pursued a higher education at Johns Hopkins University and later attended the University of Maryland Law School, where he earned a law degree. His academic achievements paved the way for a successful legal career. In 1969, Stan and Carol moved to Philadelphia, where Stan began working at a law firm of Friedman, Borowski, and Laurie. His legal career flourished and became known for his integrity, expertise, and the commitment of his clients. Stan served as president of Lowell Marian Synagogue and the Torah Academy of Greater Philadelphia. He also chaired an educational committee in Philadelphia and was a board member of the Philadelphia Yeshiva. Through these roles, Stan made a significant contribution to the Jewish community in broader Lower Marion area and became one of the leading pioneers. One of Stan's noble contributions was his involvement in supporting refuseniks in the former Soviet Union. He actively helped these Jewish individuals uphold the rituals and customs by delivering religious articles and Judaic and demonstrating a deep commitment to his faith and fellow Jews. Stan and Carol were blessed with 4 children, Cindy, Yonah, Stephen, and Mikey. They further enriched their family with 16 wonderful grandchildren. Through his life, Stan exemplified leadership, dedication, and compassion. His contributions to the community, his unwavering support for Jewish traditions, and his love for family have left an enduring legacy. Stan's life serves as an inspiration to all those that knew him. Toby Campbell was born on December 4th. This is Ari Capel's mother. December 4th, 1938, in Brooklyn, New York, the youngest of 3 children. She married Marvin Campbell and raised 3 children, Robin, Andrew, and Ari. The family moved to Brooklyn to Staten Island in 1972, and shortly thereafter, Toby joined the workforce as a salesperson for Macy's department store. She worked her way up to the manager of the cosmetics department, and eventually moved on to become employed by Rose Salkin Bridal before she retired. Post-retirement, she and Marvin bought a condo in Delray Beach and became snowbirds. She spent her last few years living in full-time before a brief final stay at Daughters of Miriam in Clifton. She passed away on her first Yom Tov of Sukkot this year. Toby was very active in civic life, and family joined Temple Beth El, a traditional conservative synagogue. She was regularly attending Liyah for our own Shabbos and Yom Tov. Toby was never shy about meeting new people and quickly made a name for herself as the one to speak with if you're new to the area. She was sisterhood president 3 times and remained active for many years, offering to help as needed basis, which of course was often. Toby was very strong personality, and she never backed down from a conflict. She was a staunch defender of her family, no matter what the situation. Her family was her pride and joy, and her 3 grandchildren, Julia, Raisa, and Ethan, were the diamonds of her eyes. She spent many hours on the phone checking on the health and general well-being for our extended family members and friends. Toby had an open door policy for Shabbos and Yom Tovs. If you needed a place to eat, she loved cooking and had varied recipes. She learned from her mother, who immigrated from Russia. On Shabbos and especially Yom Tov, she would cook for twice the amount of expected people, and if someone stopped at the last minute, there was always room for one more. Those last words were inscribed on her tombstone and truly embodies her generosity, kindness, and spirit. She was an Ashes Chaya, woman of valor. So this is Erwin Kastner. So if you knew, he was a member for a long time at Or Torah in West Orange Shores. Dr. Erwin Kastner was born in 1929, the younger of twins to Selig and Esther Krasna, immigrants of Poland. He had an older and younger sister and lived together with their family and paternal grandfather, first Williamsburg and Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Dr. Krasna. Dr. Krasna attended Crown Heights Yeshiva and Yeshiva Torah B'das, and then Yeshiva University, where for 4 years he was in Rev Soloveitchik's chair. After first receiving an MS in biochemistry from Columbia College, Dr. Krasna attended Chicago Medical School, one of the few programs that accepted Jews. After the medical training, he was a medical officer in USAF, stationed with his young family in frigid Kinross, Michigan. Following 7 years of training in pediatric surgery, Dr. Krasna joined a prominent New York practice and became chief pediatric surgeon in Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, living in Forest Hills, Queens. An illicit Mossad sponsored trip to the USSR with his brother in 1970 to meet Jewish refuseniks, followed by a month-long volunteer stint at Tel HaShomer Hospital during the Yom Kippur War, which he spoke about, by the way, at ABJ&D, where he worked in the burn unit, helping soldiers wounded in tanks recovering from their wounds, convinced him to move his young family to Israel in 1976. He then headed the Department of Pediatric Surgery in Shaarei Tzedek for 5 years before returning to the U.S. in 1981 and served the remainder of professional years as a chief pediatric surgery at Robert Wood Johnson Hospital in New Brunswick, New Jersey. After his retirement in 2001, Dr. Krasna returned to Forest Hills and spent 12 years traveling between there and Israel, where 3 of his 5 children live in Modi'in. The Krasna moved to West Orange in 2013 after Anne suffered a debilitating stroke to be closer to their daughter at the Levinson. After his wife's passing in 2019, Dr. Krasna spent half a year in Israel with his children there, and half a year in the U.S. with his children here. In July 2022, he made his second aliyah to Israel at age 93 and lived there the remaining years in his apartment in Wolfson Tower, admiring his amazing view of the Knesset and Israel Museum. Dr. Krasna is survived by his 5 children, 16 grandchildren, 30 great-grandchildren, and is buried next to his beloved wife in Beit Shemesh. Janice Rosenblum, the sister of Stuart Rosenblum, she would come around often to, whenever she came to shul. I actually knew her personally. I went to Israel with her on a yachad trip. We remembered fondly Janice Rosenblum, the older sister of Stuart Rosenblum. Janice was never married and lived with his parents in a reciprocal relationship. She did what she could for them and vice versa as both aged, and their roles reversed during the many medical challenges. Janice was born with Williams syndrome, which limited her in some areas, but she excelled in others. Most notably, her love for people, never forgetting a name or a face, where you lived, your profession, the last time that she saw you, and the construct of your immediate family. This general love for people made her loved by many. When nothing else was going on, she would call friends she did not see in a year just to catch up. By the end of the Pesach program in Long Branch, she knew at least 100 new people by name. She loved music, animals, and her favorite hobby was beading necklaces to give out to new friends. Her special light was an inspiration to all that knew her. And the last one is Hetty Steele, mother of Jeff Steele. Hetty Almona Steele, Chaya Tova Batya Bat Rav Mordechai and Linka Weeder, born in Arad, Romania in 1938 in the Vichnitz Hasidic family, the oldest of three siblings, survived World War II and arrived in the U.S. in 1948. Hetty grew up in the Bronx and embraced being an American, went to Beis Yaakov, and thrived as a teenager in her new surroundings, joined by many Jewish social groups. Smart, beautiful, athletic, with a love of dance, she was always remembered by her friends as a can-do person. She was an Israeli dance instructor, always leading the dance at Smachot, a camp lifeguard, and a mother, led fundraising events, hosted parties, and attended shiurim whenever possible. She met her husband, Jonas Steele, on the volleyball court at the Pioneer Hotel in the Catskill Mountains, and they were married in 1957 when she was 18 years old. She had two children, Roberta and Jeff, and 7 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchildren. She was intensely supportive of his mother and wanted the best for her family and Klal Yisrael. A passion for teaching, and her teaching as soon as her children were old enough. While teaching at yeshivos, she attended Brooklyn College in the evenings, achieving her bachelor's and master's degrees in education. Armed with her degree, she began a 20-year career in the New York City Board of Education, where she climbed the ladder to eventually become a district supervision of special education in Brooklyn. Through all her years, the one job she wouldn't give up was teaching and eventually running a Talmud Torah program at Belrose Jewish Center in Queens. She loves seeing kids learning regardless of the subject, but teaching Yiddishkeit was a favorite. Hetty loved helping people and continued to do so after retirement, helping seniors to get to the store and medical appointments, doing whatever she could to enhance their life. A Bill Balat Tzedakah, helping Israel families, yeshivos, rebbeim, and the less fortunate. She passed away on November 21st, 2023. Okay, before we get to the next, the end of this, we'll just quickly do the kina, 2 minutes for the Holocaust, and then right after that, we'll wrap it up with a couple more videos. So you can pick one of the Holocaust ones. There's one by Rabbi Schwab. There's different ones, so I'll do it, and then we'll end off with Eli Zion. So 2 minutes. Okay, we'll end off with the just a video. It's a very powerful video from Naftali Bennett on hope. Tisha B'Av, the first part of the day is just trying to mourn, trying to understand the problem, and then we have hope and try to figure out where we go to in the future. Oh, this is before that. Are we truly ready for this, Hamikdash?
Shalom, my friends. We appreciate everyone coming from all around the world to Israel now at a very tough moment for us. I want to tell you and share with you why I believe the next 50 years are going to be a remarkable time for the state of Israel, for our people, for our economy, and for what we can give the world. But we have to start from the epicenter of October 7th. October 7th, at 6:29 in the morning, Hamas attacked Israel. Thousands of Hamas terrorists breached the fence, the border, entered at dozens and dozens of points, and attacked dozens of communities, slaughtering 1,400 Israelis, kidnapping 240, and bringing Israel to its worst moment. October 7th tells two stories. And the first story, we have to look at it with clear eyes. It's an epic, colossal failure of the state of Israel. We failed. Our most fundamental mission when founding the state of Israel, that never again would Jews be helplessly under a massacre, under a pogrom going on for hours and hours. We did know, and we always knew, that there would be terror here and there, and usually terror attacks go on for anywhere between 10 seconds and 5 minutes. That's the cost of living here. But on our basic, most fundamental mission, we failed. We failed in intelligence, we failed in operations, and subsequently, for about a month after the attacks, institutional Israel, almost all governmental ministries melted down. Education system, welfare, finance, nothing worked. But the second half of the story is a remarkable story where the nation arose. On October 7th, the moment the news began percolating around Israel, thousands of Israelis, young men and women from all across Israel, got in their cars, drove down into that inferno, into the Gaza envelope, as we like to call it, and went to defend their brothers and sisters, but actually people they've never met, saving thousands and thousands of lives and preventing a much worse disaster. Whether it's Ben Shimoni from Beersheba, this amazing guy who 3 times went into the Nova party with his car, he had no pistol even, just to rescue people, and the 3rd time he was killed. Or whether it's Elchanan Kalmanzon, a 42-year-old guy, the family, 5 kids from a community around Jerusalem, got in a car with his brother and nephew, drove down to Kibbutz Be'eri, and for 16 hours straight, he went with his nephew and brother, from one home to another, evacuating members of the kibbutz, saving 100 lives, 16 hours. And on Sunday morning at 9 a.m., took a bullet and died. But there's thousands of young men and women in Bal, at Nir-Am, or Tal Biton in her tank, and they saved the day because there were thousands of those Elchanans, thousands of those Tal Bitons. Now, this is extraordinary. Just as a way of comparison, I was in Manhattan on 9/11. I'm like sort of the Forrest Gump of disasters. And I remember I was in Midtown, I saw the towers on fire, and I saw a river of people going north, walking very quickly away from the towers, which is a natural thing to do. The only people who were driving south towards the towers were those firefighters, heroic firefighters, but that's their job. But in Israel, thousands of people were driving towards the disaster, and just citizens and policemen and reservists. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because there's sort of a cloud of anxiety and depression that's descended on Israel. You can't not feel it when you talk to Israelis. And it's understandable. This is a national trauma. But I draw my strength from meeting hundreds of these men and women, remarkable men and women that showed courage. I want to give you a data point that you can take along with you. On October 7th, there were actually 4 massacres in 3 kibbutzim, in Kfar Aza, Be'eri, Nir Oz, and at the Nova Festival. But there were roughly another 60 battles at 60 other kibbutzim and cities where we meaning the people, fended off the terrorists. Yad Mordechai, Mefalsim, Nir-Am, Alumim, Saad, Iftachim, you name it, Kisufim, across the board, and Abzor, Ofakim, Sderot. And in all of those 60 cases, usually it was about 6 to 10 defenders, citizens, fighting about, on average, anywhere between 50 and 100 terrorists. And we prevented our people, not institutional Israel, but the people of Israel, fought back and prevented a pogrom, usually incurring 1 or 2 or 3 casualties. In almost all cases, we lost 1 or 2 lives. But we, the people of Israel, the nation, saved the day. And I draw my own confidence in the future of Israel from these people. And it didn't stop on October 7th. For the following months, what happened was Startup Nation became again Startup Nation. Literally thousands of small initiatives filled all the gaps that institutional Israel could not handle. Getting helmets, designing very rapidly arms that are necessary or anything necessary, getting food, getting people from one place to another, a meltdown of the system and a rise of Israel. Now back to my statement, I assert that Israel is going to have a short-term bumpy period, very bumpy. It might get worse before it gets better. But then we're in for 50 years of amazing growth and success. And I'll tell you why. The single most valuable resource in 2024, even more than NVIDIA chips, is what are we going to need in the day and age of LLMs, of AGI. Within 2-3 years, we're going to see AGI, artificial general intelligence, which in simple English means computers are going to get smarter than people. So within about 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, whatever, soon, computers are going to be smarter than people. That's a fact. We know that. So what are we going to need from people? What's the added value of people? The added value of people, and what we're going to need in the next 50 years more than anything, is people who can make stuff happen. Because intelligence in itself is not action. Intelligence is one very important dimension, but ultimately you need to put together all those pipes to push, to change, to make stuff happen, to organize people. And what do you need? Well, you need two main things. You need the talent, okay, meaning being innovative, being flexible, dynamic, being resourceful, makeshift, being able to change. And we know, and we knew, that the state of Israel generates these sort of young men and women. That we knew before, the startup nation. But here's what we didn't know, and I admit I didn't know, certainly not to this degree. The second critical ingredient, besides all those elements and characteristics that I just defined of intelligence, flexibility, agility, etc., group working, you need to be tough. You need to be resilient. Right? We're going to need strong people, not Israel, the whole world. You're going to need tough people. And what we discovered on October 7th and thereafter is we have a younger generation that is the toughest we've ever seen. The men and women that are out there right now fighting for 180 days, resilient, tough, because it's a tough period. You know, last week we commemorated 80 years of D-Day, that attack on Normandy. And I thought about those veterans, the American generation that fought in Europe in World War II, in the Pacific. When they came back to the United States after the war, after 3-4 years in the war, that generation was embedded with amazing values of hard work, of determination, of group work, of resilience, of patriotism, of idealism. And they carried the United States of America for the following 50 years of amazing growth. The best period in any country in the world was post-World War II, because they were the greatest generation. Right now, the younger generation, our younger generation, is Israel's greatest generation, because they have been embedded with work ethics, with courage, with strength, resilience, and idealism. And every one of them has been changed forever and cares more about the state of Israel, more about building a future here. We're not giving up. So when I look at three multiples, the entrepreneurship element, times the toughness, times having a lot of kids in Israel. Israel's the only advanced nation on earth that's growing demographically. Came back from Korea a while ago. They're at 0.8 children per family. In Israel, even if you carve out the ultra-Orthodox, we're at 2.4, which is positive growth. The only country in the world. And when I talk about resilience, you know, I've been to dozens of universities in America. I'm seeing something interesting. I'm seeing in some areas this uber softness. Everyone's getting offended. Microaggressions. Don't say this, don't say that. I need a safe space. In Israel, there aren't safe spaces. We got to be tough. So we're generating these amazing young men and women. Prior to the horrible year of 2023, even predating the war, Israel was on a very good trajectory, but I have to tell you that we had exhausted our talent. We had run out of talent, which is why salaries in high tech were crazy, etc., etc. But here's the thing. If you look at Israel as an engine and talent as fuel, we have reserves of fuel. We have 3 reserves that have not yet been used. The first one is the ultra-Orthodox Haredi population, incredibly smart men and women, but the men, by and large, don't work. This is going to change. And once it does change, we're going to get all this fuel of brilliance into our systems, into our economy, into our growth systems. The second fuel is the Israeli Arab community, which by and large is becoming more part of Israel, but it's a tough ride. And the third is what we call Aliyah, Jews from around the world. And I would set a goal of bringing 1 million Jews from around the world over the next decade. And when you pour those three channels into our engine, you're going to get a steaming engine for the next 50 years. So if Israel was a company, the fundamentals are the best ever. Management is far from amazing, but that's solvable. And when we solve that, we're going to get over this. And we're looking at 50 years of prosperity. We're going to need to change. Be more independent on some elements, be tougher. But Israel is the breeding ground for the super entrepreneurs of the next 50 years. So for all of you who've come from around the world, now's a great time to invest in Israel. Prices are low. You can get some good bargains. Two of my companies are now raising money. We've closed the round, so I'm not fundraising. I want to thank those of you who have come, like you over there, come to Israel now, and we'll remember who was with Israel now, because we're in for an amazing ride. Thank you very much.
All right, I'd like to just before we end, on with one more. What's happening here? There's one
Shalom,
more.
my friends. We appreciate
it. The last slide. It's a very quick video to end off.
Hey, you! Be sad!
What?
Be sad!
Why?
Because a big building got burnt down!
Oh. When?
2,000 years ago.
Oh. Okay.
So be sad about it. Now!
Okay.
And no swimming, no music, no partying.
Because of the building?
Now cry! It's crying time. Come on!
Okay. Like that? Here's another way of looking at it. You okay, mister? So sad. So tragic. What is it? Terrible. What you crying about? I'm crying about you, kid. About me. About all of us. We're the Jewish people. We're supposed to be great. Not just in high-tech, military, cherry tomatoes. We're supposed to be bursting with clarity, with purpose, with godliness. And I tell you, kid, if we were like that, the whole world would be swept off its feet along with us. And that building that got burnt down, that's God's embassy in this world, where he unloads all his goodness to the world from, for all of humanity. And for us, it was our private meeting room with him. And that's our job, to be world inspirers. And instead, look at what occupies our thoughts most of the time. What are our expectations of life? What's happened to us? That is sad. Well, kid, now that we've cried about it, we can get on with fixing it.
Okay. Now we'll just say Elitzion, and again, 1 o'clock we'll reconvene in the shul for the next video. We're going to be showing the Gush video at 1 o'clock. There'll be Tehillim, then Mincha, early mincha. There'll be 2 minchas, and then the Gush video. After the Gush video, we'll have the women's Tehillim, and then at 2:40, and then 4 o'clock will be the Chafetz Chaim videos, and at 6 o'clock will be the interview with Dr. K. So we'll now do the last Kena, Eli Tzion, and this also has a song. Feel free to unmute if you want and join me in Eli Tzion. Eli Tzion ve'areha, kimo isha b'tzireha, v'chifesu lo chagu ratzak, al ba'al neureha. It looks at the whole process as a woman who's giving birth, where there's so much pain, but at the end, there's simcha of a child. Alei armon asher nutash be'ashma son adareha ve'al bias mecharfei el b'sof mitkash chadareha elei tzion ve'areha k'mo isha b'tzireha v'chibisula chagura sakal al nureha legal os mishar se'el Minei shir zimareha ve'al mama sheshufach k'mo meimei yeoreha eli tzion ve'areha mo isha v'tzireha v'chivasula chagura sak al ba'al nireha lehayon mecholeha asher damam be'areha ve'al ba'ad asher shamem b'tul Sanhedrea eli tzion ve'areha k'mo isha v'tzireha v'chivasula chagura sak al ba'al ne'areha le'zivchei senideha v'pidyon v'chureha ve'al chilul k'lei heichal mizbach k'toreha eli tzion ve'areha k'mo isha v'tzireha v'chivasula chagura sak al ba'al ne'areha le'tapel Melacheha b'nei David Yevireha ve'al Yafyam asher chashach ve'es sarur kesareha eli tzion ve'areha k'mo isha v'tzireha k'zula chagura sakal ba'al neureha le'kavod asher gala ve'es kurban Yevireha ve'al luchetz asher lachat sham sakim Chagureha eli tzion ve'areha k'mo isha v'tzireha v'chivasula chagura sak al ba'al nureha le'machatz ve'rov machutz asher huku nizireha ve'al nifutz ve'alei sela leha ne'areha eli tzion ve'areha k'mo isha v'tzireha v'chivasula chagura sak al ba'al nureha le'simchatz ve'oiveha sachaku al shavareha ve'al inuit B'nei chorim nediveha tehoreha elei tzion ve'areha k'mo isha v'tzireha v'chivasula chagura sak al ba'al neureha le'peh sha'asher ivasa tzilul derecha shureha ve'al tzibeos keholeha shizufeha shechoreha eli tzion ve'areha k'mo isha v'tzireha v'chivasula chagura sak al ba'al neureha le'kolos Mecharfeha be'es rabo pegareha ve'al regshas megad feha besof mishkan chatzereha eli tzion ve'areha k'mo isha v'tzireha v'chivasula chagura sak al ba'al neureha le'shivcha asher cholu v'fi kamei mitzireha ve'al tachan yitzveichu